Chapter 1464. Gift Bowed. Chapter 1464. Gift Bow. Brother Yen. Worried, Su Zimo arrived beside Yen Beichen in a flash and took out a few elixirs from his storage bag, stuffing them into Yen Beichen's mouth forcefully. The storyteller tapped his finger gently and a divine light entered Yen Beichen's body. Yen Beichen's injuries stabilized rapidly. He's fine, merely severely injured. Now that he got his revenge, the tension in his mind was released and thus he was temporarily knocked out. The storyteller said, given his bloodline, he only needs to recuperate for a few days and will recover mostly. Unless he commits suicide, it's difficult for the successor of the Fiend Emperor Hatred to die. His injuries are not external, but internal, the storyteller said meaningfully. Su Zimo understood. Yen Beichen's true injury was in his heart. Initially, he felt extremely guilty and remorseful. Living in pain every day, the only thing that supported him to survive was revenge. Now that Yen Beichen had taken his revenge and lost his obsession, there was a high chance that he would commit suicide like the Fiend Emperor Hatred. In a while, stay in Enigma Palace for a few days with him. The storyteller said, you can try and talk sense into him when he's awake. Thank you, Senior. Su Zimo expressed his thanks hurriedly. Today, Yen Beichen charged into Enigma Palace and even killed half-martial ancestors of Enigma Palace. However, instead of blaming Yen Beichen, the storyteller retained him. His bearing and magnanimity was something that the other cultivators of Enigma Palace could not compare to. Half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe frowned and took a step forward, as though he wanted to say something. Patriarch Qing Cheng glared at him and shook his head gently. Half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe was alarmed and retreated hurriedly. Su Zimo supported Yen Beichen up first and handed him to Ming Zhan to take care of. He then came before the storyteller and bowed deeply. I was rude today and barged into Enigma Palace, fighting all the cultivators here. Please forgive me, Senior. It's nothing much. There's a reason for it, so you're not to blame. The storyteller did not have any intention of blaming him. Instead, he smiled and said, furthermore, you've already been very restrained compared to the battle at Heaven and Earth Valley. Actually, not many people had truly died up till this point of the battle. Even for some half-martial ancestors of Enigma Palace who were severely injured, only their physical bodies were destroyed, their essence spirits managed to escape. Given Su Zimo's capabilities, it would be extremely easy for him to kill their essence spirits. Although the storyteller was not present, he seemed to have seen through everything. He knew in his heart that if Su Zimo were to truly start a massacre, there would be rivers of blood in front of Enigma Palace. Su Zimo handed the dermic-breaking bow over. This is a treasure of Enigma Palace. Since today's matter has been resolved, I'll return it to its owner. The storyteller glanced at it indifferently and said, since you snatched this bow, take it. Ah! Su Zimo froze for a moment. This dermic bow was one of the unique treasures and its terrifying might was revealed earlier on. In his hands, the power was even more shocking. The storyteller had given him such a great treasure casually. How can that do? Finally, half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe could not help but say, this dermic-breaking bow is an ancient unique treasure and one of the great treasures of Enigma Palace. How can we give it to outsiders casually? You still have the cheek to say that? The storyteller sneered, since you can't even protect the dermic-breaking bow and let someone snatch it away, it proves that the bow is nothing in your hands. You might as well give it to someone else. Even if it's given to others, it can't be desolate martial. Half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe's face flushed red as he argued. Desolate Martial just killed a conjoint body mighty figure of our palace and severely injured several half-martial ancestor experts. If we give him the dermic-breaking bow, wouldn't the cultivators of the palace be disheartened? Disheartened? The storyteller sneered once more. What's more disheartening than having an incapable palace lord who can't differentiate between right and wrong? Half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe shuddered. The storyteller's gaze landed on half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe and the others as he said coldly, you guys are truly promising. The outcome of a group of you discussing was to join forces with the primordial races. That's akin to asking a tiger for its skin. A primordial taboo is a reason for you guys to join forces with the primordial races. You guys have truly forgotten about your roots. Damn it! The storyteller's tone was extremely stern and his gaze eventually landed on half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe. Qing Zhe, you're useless and can't tell between right from wrong, twisting the facts. From this day forth, you shall relinquish your position as the palace lord and reflect on your mistakes on your own. Without my orders, you're not to come out of seclusion. The crowd fell into an uproar. Nobody expected that the position of the palace lord of Enigma Palace of half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe would be removed because of this battle. That punishment was extremely severe. Isn't this punishment a little overboard? Patriarch Qing Cheng frowned slightly and whispered. How can we blame this on fellow Daoist Qing Zhe? Half-martial ancestor Qian Tian stood out and looked at the storyteller. Although you're this generation's storyteller of Enigma Palace and have an extraordinary status, you can't be so unreasonable, right? Su Zimo's heart stirred. From the tone of half-martial ancestor Qian Tian, it seemed like the status of being a storyteller was far from simple. Half-martial ancestor Divine Turtle Dove nodded as well. Desolate Marshal and the others attacked our sect today and demanded for one of ours. We had no choice but to fight. No matter what, for today's matter, Desolate Marshal and the others were the ones who were rude first. Foo-foo. The storyteller sneered. I've been playing with the mortal world and haven't returned to the palace for a long time. I've got to thank Desolate Marshal this time round. If not for their antics, I wouldn't have known that Enigma Palace would have been reduced to such a state. Enigma Palace sure is a motley place right now. All sorts of troublemakers have popped out for this battle. There was a cold killing intent in the storyteller's tone. Both half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtle Dove felt guilty and their gazes flickered. They no longer argued and remained silent. That's not all. The storyteller's expression was cold and he no longer had the cheeky attitude from earlier on as he said slowly. That girl is the successor of founder Master Ling Long. Even I won't hurt her. Yet, you guys tried to kill her? Half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe, half-martial ancestor Li Hang and the others lowered their heads and did not dare to speak. Indeed, they were in the wrong for this matter. After obtaining Fairy Ling Long's inheritance, Demoness Ji's status was even nobler than the Palace Lord of Enigma Palace. Nobody from Enigma Palace could hurt her. Their attack was equivalent to the greatest disrespect to founder Master Ling Long. Demoness Ji had a ball of pent-up anger in her heart. Now that she heard the storyteller's words, her anger vanished instantly as she could not help but laugh. Bowing to the storyteller she said, Senior, thank you for helping me vent my anger. It's nothing. The storyteller waved it off. Senior, I'm fine. Let's forget about today's matter. Demoness Ji did not want to sow grudges with most of the experts of Enigma Palace over such a small matter either. No worries. The storyteller shook his head. Today's matter isn't over yet. The old storyteller's gaze landed on half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtle Dove as he asked coldly. When did you guys learn the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, huh? Chapter 1465. Decisive to Kill. Chapter 1465. Decisive to Kill. The expressions of half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtle Dove changed starkly. The expressions of half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe, half-martial ancestor Li Hang and the others changed slightly as well. All of them turned to look at the two half-martial ancestors in disbelief. The expressions of the two half-martial ancestors, Qian Tian and Divine Turtle Dove, were terrible and unpredictable. In front of the storyteller, they did not even have the courage to lie. We did cultivate this fiend technique, but that's nothing much, right? Half-martial ancestor Qian Tian forced a smile and explained. Enigma Palace covers a wide spectrum of knowledge and we don't belong to any immortal, Buddhist or fiend sections. There's no lack of cultivation technique from the fiend sects in our sect as well. Other fiend techniques are nothing much, but don't you guys know what sort of a cultivation technique the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra is? The storyteller's gaze was sharp as he said coldly, don't you guys know how much of a catastrophe that fiend caused in Tianhuang mainland 40,000 years ago? Once you're tainted by this fiend technique, you'll sink into it. Given your natures, can you control it? Under the pressure of the storyteller, half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtle Dove were already drenched in cold sweat and did not dare to say anything. Speak. Who imparted this fiend technique to you guys? The storyteller asked slowly. Heavenly Secrets. Heavenly Secrets was the one. Half-martial ancestor Divine Turtledove could not withstand it and was the first to speak. We've already lived for more than 15,000 years and started entering our later years. However, we haven't been able to advance to the Mahayana realm for a long time. Heavenly Secrets was the one who came looking for us. He told us that there's a cultivation technique that can help us advance to the Mahayana realm. We only cultivated it to become Mahayana patriarchs and strengthen our sex power. No wonder. A look of realization flashed through Lin Xuanji's eyes. In the past 2 years, as long as Heavenly Secrets made a decision, the two half-martial ancestors, Qian Tian and Divine Turtledove, would support him with all their might. Even when they joined forces with the primordial races to imprison Lin Xuanji, these two half-martial ancestors were the first to stand on the side of Heavenly Secrets. However, although the source of how these two learned their fiend cultivation technique was discovered, they would never know how Heavenly Secrets learned it. The storyteller closed his eyes for a long time before opening them slowly. He looked at the two half-martial ancestors, Qian Tian and Divine Turtledove, and said in a deep voice, "The two of you have already committed a grave mistake cultivating this fiend technique. On account of your many years in Enigma Palace, I can spare you this once. However, you'll return everything you've learned in this lifetime to Enigma Palace today. From now on, you can be mortals and stop cultivating." Half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtledove were shocked. To be mortals. The storyteller meant that he was going to cripple their cultivations. Both of them lowered their heads slightly and a strange blood glint flashed through the depths of their eyes. All of a sudden, a gigantic blood mist burst forth from the two of them and they turned into two bloodlights that fled in two different directions. The speed of the bloodlights was way too fast. Almost instantly, they were 500 kilometers away. This was blood escape from the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Patriarch Qing Cheng frowned and extended his palm, grabbing towards half-martial ancestor Qian Tian. Swoosh! His palm brushed past the bloodlight. Even when a patriarch attacked, he was a tad slower. The speed of the blood escape technique released by half-martial ancestors after burning their bloodlines was indeed terrifying. By the time Patriarch Qing Cheng reacted, the two of them had already fled to the horizons. Ha 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 ha! Half-martial ancestor Qian Tian's laughter sounded. Storyteller old dog, we've worked in Enigma Palace for many years. Even if we didn't contribute, we did our best. Yet, you want to cripple our cultivations with just a few words. Once the two of us escape today, the world will be vast. Old dog, you'll regret this sooner or later. The day we become patriarchs will be the day we make a comeback. Ha 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 ha. Both of them laughed wantonly. The storyteller was expressionless and did not move. Suddenly, he reached out with both palms and yanked in the direction where the two of them were escaping. The feeling was as though he was trying to pull the two half-martial ancestors back from 500 kilometers away. A strange power spread. Although there was no deafening commotion, the two figures that were about to disappear into the horizon gradually became clearer in front of the crowd. Half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtledove were still releasing blood escape without slowing down at all. However, the distance between the two of them and the storyteller was shrinking continuously. Although it was clearly in the opposite direction, the more they fled, the closer they were to the storyteller. Pest! The cultivators gasped. That method had already surpassed everyone's understanding. Is that a divine power? Su Zimo murmured softly. Before long, half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtledove were dragged back by the storyteller who was 500 kilometers away. Under the gaze of the storyteller, the two half-martial ancestors were horrified and were still escaping frantically. However, no matter how much strength they exerted, they were only getting closer to the storyteller and they returned to Enigma Palace before long. This time round, both of them were truly scared out of their wits. Please spare our lives. Half-martial ancestor Qian Tian and half-martial ancestor Divine Turtledove knelt with a thud and said incoherently with pale faces. I could have spared your lives earlier on. The storyteller shook his head slowly. But I can't do it now. The moment he said that, the storyteller did not give the two half-martial ancestors a chance to explain and extended his palm, slashing in front of them like a saber. The heads of the two half-martial ancestors seemed to have been sliced into two by some divine weapon as blood gushed out and their essence spirits were destroyed on the spot. Two half-martial ancestors of Enigma Palace were dead. All the cultivators in the world were silent. A half-martial ancestor expert was almost a peak existence in the cultivation world. However, in the hands of the storyteller, two of them were killed casually as though ants were being crushed. Every cultivator of Enigma Palace looked at the storyteller with reverence in their eyes. Su Zimo sighed internally. For the matter of heavenly secrets, the storyteller was slightly hesitant and even gave the former a chance in the end. This gave everyone the illusion that the storyteller was benevolent. However, in reality, the reason why the storyteller was so hesitant was because Heavenly Secrets was his disciple. How could he sever the many years of relationship between master and disciple within a short period of time? However, later on, the storyteller completely displayed his decisiveness to kill. With a few words, he removed the Palace Lord of Enigma Palace. He killed two half-martial ancestors with a thunderous might. He did not hesitate at all. His attack had stunned everyone in Enigma Palace. Bury the two of them. The storyteller waved it off and turned to Su Zimo and the others. It's all thanks to you guys that Enigma Palace is able to get rid of this huge problem today. You're making things sound too serious, Senior. Su Zimo said hurriedly. If you're free, why don't you rest for a few days at Enigma Palace? The storyteller said, at the same time, Xueqi can take you guys around. All right, thank you, Senior. Su Zimo cupped his fists. Yen Beichen was unconscious and could recuperate in Enigma Palace for a few days. At the same time, he could find an opportunity to ask about the killing badge of the Bloodvine race. Chapter 1466. Dao Inheritance. Chapter 1466. Dao Inheritance. Let's go, follow me into the palace. The storyteller nodded to Su Zimo and the others and said, I'll take my leave now that this is over. Patriarch Qing Cheng bowed slightly to the storyteller and said respectfully, Yes, you can head back. The storyteller waved it off. Patriarch Qing Cheng raised his head and glanced at Su Zimo in a seemingly casual manner before turning around. He swiped his palm in the void and created a gigantic crack. In a flash, Patriarch Qing Cheng leaped into the crack and vanished. In the blink of an eye, the crack healed gradually and returned to normal. Tearing the void casually. That's the power of the Mahayana realm. The storyteller explained, if one can advance to the Mahayana realm and become a patriarch, they can tear through the void at any moment and cross 5,000 kilometers. Su Zimo nodded, still thinking about the way Patriarch Qing Cheng looked at him before departing. There was hostility in that gaze. Because of Su Zimo, half-martial ancestor Qing Zai's status as the Palace Lord was relinquished. Even Patriarch Qing Cheng was lectured by the storyteller and lost his dignity. Although he said nothing, he definitely felt resentment in his heart. Su Zimo glanced at the storyteller again. Back in the capital of Great Zhou, he had already met this old man. However, who would have thought that this secular old man would possess such a powerful identity and status? Even Mahayana patriarchs had to bow down before him. Senior, are you an emperor? Unable to contain his curiosity, Su Zimo could not help but ask. The storyteller smiled. Yes. That simple word caused Su Zimo and the others' hearts to skip a beat. Even though they had a hunch, when the storyteller actually admitted it, the feeling was entirely different. A legendary emperor was standing right in front of them. Demonist Ji blinked and asked, Senior, what's your title? Typically, emperors had specific titles. For example, the Human Emperor, Saber Emperor and Thunder Emperor. My title is Mystic. The storyteller said indifferently. Mystic Emperor. Su Zimo thought for a moment and asked again, what's the significance of being a storyteller? The storyteller is a special existence in Enigma Palace that is free from the restrictions of Enigma Palace. The storyteller said, the creation of this existence can be traced back to the ancient era. Founder Master Ling Long's disciple was the first-generation storyteller. In every generation, there's only one storyteller. The responsibility of a storyteller is to roam the mortal world and spread stories everywhere. Su Zimo had witnessed the storyteller's storytelling process before. Indeed, he was extremely good in his narration and spoke mostly of strange tales of fiends and demons. Previously, he heard a short passage from the side and it was truly interesting. The storyteller spoke as though everything had truly happened. When he said it, it was as though he was right in the midst of everything and everyone was immersed in it. However, given the high status of the storyteller in Enigma Palace, the fact that his actual responsibility was to roam the mortal world and spread stories was truly incredulous. Why would Enigma Palace set up such an existence? Demoness G asked in confusion. Do you guys know the reason why Fairy Ling Long established Enigma Palace? The storyteller did not reply and asked instead. Su Zimo and the others shook their heads. The storyteller said, from the ancient sages, there is the saying of the 3 everlasting values. One can establish their worth in the order of virtues, meritorious accomplishments and teachings. Virtues, meritorious accomplishments and teachings. Su Zimo murmured softly in deep thought. The old storyteller continued, the establishment of Enigma Palace was for the sake of establishing teachings. By that, it means for us to record history, continue creating merits, pass down civilization and inherit the Dao. There are many things that people will gradually forget as time passes. However, Enigma Palace will not forget and will record them down and pass them down. I roamed the human world for tens of thousands of years and recounted the tragic era of the human race in the primordial era. I recounted the ancient war and the legacy of the emperors. Everything that happened was real and was recorded in Enigma Palace. That's the culture of our human race. Su Zimo and the others were dumbfounded in shock. Su Zimo had not expected that the stories told by the storyteller around the world were not fiction, they were all a real part of history. Less than that, he had not expected that the establishment of Enigma Palace was not for the sake of imparting dermic arts and secret skills, but the soul and civilization of the entire human race. That was the true intention of Fairy Ling Long when she established Enigma Palace. The storyteller stopped in his tracks and gazed into the distance, lamenting, the world has changed. No race will prosper forever. Founder Master Ling Long had long expected that the fortune of the human race would one day decline as well. Perhaps the human race might encounter great calamities and sufferings. However, as long as Enigma Palace is around, the civilization of the human race will continue forever. As long as civilization is not destroyed, humans will rise once more one day. One day, humans will welcome the glorious era of the ancient era where multiple emperors rose. At that point, be it Su Zimo, Demoness Ji or Ming Zhan, all of them looked in the direction of Enigma Palace with reverence. Instantly, everyone seemed to have gone against the flow of time and saw that peerless woman from the ancient era who stood on this land. Although Fairy Ling Long was not an emperor, she was worthy of eternal praise. A moment later, Demoness Ji asked again, Senior, doesn't that mean that Enigma Palace records many things about Tianhuang mainland? That's right. The storyteller nodded with a smile. Senior, what did you mean by the legacy of the emperors? The storyteller smiled. For anybody that's conferred an emperor, Enigma Palace would establish a personal legacy for him and retain a record of his legend. Wow! Demoness Ji exclaimed and said enviously, this can truly be considered as leaving one's mark in history. This was an immense honor. In the cultivation world, the reason why the legends of emperors were widespread was mostly because of Enigma Palace. At that point, the storyteller suddenly turned and looked at Su Zimo with deep anticipation in his eyes. Desolate Marshal, Enigma Palace has decided to establish a personal legacy for you. Ah! Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he asked instinctively, didn't you say that only emperors are qualified for personal legacies? Establishing a legacy for you has nothing to do with the status of an emperor. It's because you're Desolate Marshal. You established the martial Dao and imparted martial arts to all living beings. The storyteller said, even the ancient emperors did not establish such merit. That alone is worthy of a personal legacy to be passed down through history. Throughout history, Su Zimo was the only one who had a personal legacy although he was not an emperor. The storyteller continued, I didn't mention the name of this personal legacy because I don't know what your future accomplishments will be. Perhaps, being an emperor might not even be your endpoint. I hope that I'll have the fortune of completing this legacy in my lifetime. If I can't, I'll have to rely on the next generation's storyteller. With that said, the storyteller glanced at Lin Xuanji beside him. Chapter 1467. Changing the Fate of the Human Race. Chapter 1467. Changing the Fate of the Human Race. Everyone turned to Lin Xuanji. Judging from the meaning of the old man, there was a high chance that the position of the next generation storyteller would be passed down to Lin Xuanji. Old man, you're in such a good condition. You don't have to rush to tell me these things. Lin Xuanji mumbled, I'm still young right now and can't take on such a huge responsibility. The storyteller said, every man has his troubles. Although I can divine everything, I can't divine how long I can live. Some things are better said beforehand. Old man, stop it. That sounds ominous. Lin Xuanji frowned again. Although he was always cheeky and impolite towards the storyteller, the latter was his kin in his heart. The storyteller smiled and reminisced. I've taken in 4 disciples in my life and arranged you guys in the order of Tian, Di, Xian, Huang. Heavenly Secrets was your eldest senior brother. Among the 4 of you, Heavenly Secrets was the most talented and cultivated the fastest. Be it in combat strength or intelligence, he was far superior to you guys. Lin Xuanji nodded. Senior brother is indeed stronger than me. The 4 of you have different personalities. Heavenly Secrets has a calm personality and was the most mature. DG is a little rigid and orderly, not understanding how to adapt. Huang Ji is honest and kind-hearted. As for you... The old storyteller looked at Lin Xuanji and paused for a moment. Your personality is the most similar to mine, wild and cynical. Normally speaking, the most suitable successor to inherit the position of storyteller should be Heavenly Secrets. Unfortunately, a moment of neglect from me and he veered onto the wrong path, resulting in a state of no return. At the mention of Heavenly Secrets, the storyteller's eyes still revealed a hint of sadness. No matter what, Heavenly Secrets was his eldest disciple and his intelligence, personality, talent and combat strength far surpassed Lin Xuanji and the other 2. The storyteller had high hopes for Heavenly Secrets as well. To think that in order to cultivate the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, Heavenly Secrets schemed against all the experts in the world and created rivers of blood in the Battle of Heaven and Earth Valley. Senior, traces of the primordial races have appeared on Tianhuang mainland all these years and they are restless. It's best for the cultivation world to make preparations beforehand. Su Zimo could not help but say. The storyteller did not reply and glanced sideways. I'm sure you must be very disappointed with the various major sects and factions of the cultivation world, right? Su Zimo did not say anything but it was a silent acknowledgement. He had experienced many things all these years. The current cultivators no longer had the same tough stance towards the primordial races. Instead they were filled with fear. Southern dual sect of the South region was destroyed by the Bloodvine race but none of the super sects appeared. Nobody was willing to get involved unless they were personally injured. However, if the major sects and factions maintained the same attitude, the primordial races would leave the Forbidden Grounds sooner or later to invade and kill everywhere in Tianhuang mainland. At that time, who could avoid them? No egg could remain whole if the nest was overturned. Actually, it's not their fault. The storyteller said, firstly, humans have never been threatened for a long time in history. Given such an environment, they will naturally shy from battle. Secondly, the fortune of the human race has indeed fallen in this generation. Be it Mahayana patriarchs or emperors, the number of them is far less than in the ancient era. Some super sects don't even have emperors backing them. There's no way they can fight against the primordial races head-on. Su Zimo nodded. Dapamkara Monastery was one of them. The storyteller continued, thirdly and most importantly, the current cultivation world lacks a supreme expert that can lead the human race. In the ancient era, there was a supreme expert like the human emperor. When he called upon the other emperors to gather, none of them would dare to disobey someone like him. But now the human race lacks an expert as such. Su Zimo gradually understood. The only way of battling the primordial races was by gathering the emperors of the world together. However, what sort of people were the emperors? All of them were top existences in Tianhuang mainland. Without a supreme expert who could suppress and call upon the entire world, who would be willing to bow down? Senior, even you can't do it? Su Zimo asked. No. The storyteller shook his head. Be it in terms of reputation or combat strength, I'm far from that. As the storyteller of Enigma Palace, I might be able to gather some emperors. However, we'll most likely be doomed if we go against the primordial races. Su Zimo frowned deeply with a heavy heart. In that case, there was a high chance that the human race would be suppressed completely if the primordial races joined forces and launched an unprecedented war against the human race. At that time, the primordial races would regain control of Tianhuang mainland. Similar to the primordial era, humans would be enslaved and treated as food without freedom. The storyteller thought for a moment and continued, "Of course, you guys don't have to be overly pessimistic. There are still some variables in this generation after all." With that said, he smiled and looked at Su Zimo. "Me?" Su Zimo froze for a moment. The storyteller nodded. "Firstly, you have a clone that cultivates in the dragon race and has a noble status as the young master of the dragon race. I believe that with your temperament, if the human race is in trouble, your dragon phoenix true body will definitely not sit by idly." Su Zimo nodded. If the human race was truly in trouble, the dragon phoenix true body would do his best to persuade the dragon race to help the human race. The storyteller continued, "Secondly, the birth of the taboos. 2 out of 3 of the great taboos of the primordial era have appeared. Furthermore, right now, both of them are on the side of the human race. Their only weakness is that they have truly yet to grow." Su Zimo did not reply. Actually, there was a high chance this generation would be an unprecedented situation where 3 primordial taboos were gathered. If they had enough time and the 3 primordial taboos grew, the primordial races would definitely have no chance of winning. Unfortunately, the primordial races would not give them much time. There's a third variable. The storyteller looked at Su Zimo and paused for a moment. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Could the storyteller have divined the existence of the martial Dao prime body? Actually, the martial Dao prime body was the greatest variable. After a brief pause, he continued, "The third variable is you. In this generation, the human race lacks a supreme expert that can command the world. Your body has fused perfectly with the creation Green Lotus and your future accomplishments are unpredictable." At that point, Su Zimo was certain that the storyteller still did not know of the existence of the martial Dao prime body despite his divine powers. "Senior, that's too much to hope for." Su Zimo laughed bitterly. "I've only just entered the conjoint body realm and I'm not even a half-martial ancestor, let alone someone who can command the world and make emperors submit to my orders. That's why it's a variable." The storyteller said, "The battle between the primordial races and humans is inevitable in this generation. If you can grow into a peerless expert before that, the fate of the human race will change because of that. You once altered the fate of all living beings. I hope that you can do the same for humans." Heaven, earth, black and yellow in meaning. Unlike heavenly secrets, some of the names don't have special meanings when joined together. Chapter 1468. Book Robbery. Chapter 1468. Book Robbery. The storyteller had high hopes for Su Zimo. Of course, as the storyteller had said, he was a variable. There was still a long way for Su Zimo to grow to the point where all the emperors in the world would submit to him. But now, the situation on Tianhuang mainland was changing rapidly. Su Zimo did not have much time left. As the storyteller spoke, he led everyone and entered Enigma Palace. From the outside, they could not see the full view of Enigma Palace yet. One could only truly experience the vicissitudes of time after entering the territory of Enigma Palace. The magnitude of emotions was not something that other sects and factions could compare to. Suddenly, the storyteller frowned and exclaimed softly. His gaze shifted and landed on an area of Enigma Palace. Su Zimo looked over as well. A gigantic palace stood in that area. It was 1,000 feet tall and soared into the skies with 9 levels. Each level could accommodate more than 100,000 people. A gigantic word was written on the plaque of the palace: Library. "What's wrong, old man?" Lin Xuanji asked casually when he saw the odd expression on the storyteller's face. "An outsider has been here." The storyteller's expression darkened slightly and his words were shocking. "Ah." Shocked, Lin Xuanji asked, "What do you mean? An outsider came to the library?" There were many secret manuals and ancient books in the library. The cultivation techniques and secret manuals were not the most important. It was the history books. The library was an important place for Enigma Palace, and even the palace master of Enigma Palace could not enter casually. What would happen if outsiders entered the library? I'll go take a look. Lin Xuanji moved and said before running over. He left a long time ago. The storyteller harumphed coldly. The people in the palace are truly a bunch of useless fools. They were played like idiots and did not even know that an outsider came to the library. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he murmured, "Could it be him?" The storyteller nodded slightly. "If I'm not wrong, the bloodlines outside Enigma Palace were also refined by this person. Monk Daming." The final doubt in Su Zimo's heart was finally resolved. Initially, he had his doubts as to why Monk Daming would set up such a trap if he merely wanted to refine bloodlines. Firstly, there were not many bloodlines left behind in this battle. Secondly, it was truly not worth it for Monk Daming to come here and refine the bloodlines given the immense threat of Enigma Palace. It was only now that Su Zimo understood. Monk Daming set this trap for him to run in front of Enigma Palace and fight against the cultivators of Enigma Palace. His true goal was not to refine the bloodlines, it was to get to Enigma Palace's library. Now that he thought about it, Monk Daming should have refined the bloodlines in front of Enigma Palace casually after he came to the library. If Heavenly Secrets did not use the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra, he might have had a chance of surviving. However, in the intense battle with Yen Beichen, an accident would definitely happen the moment he activated the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Heavenly Secrets viewed Monk Daming as his greatest opponent. However, right from the beginning, Monk Daming did not take Heavenly Secrets seriously at all. A casual action of his cost the life of the most outstanding successor of Enigma Palace. "Senior, do you know who he is?" Su Zimo asked in a testing manner. "I've divined it." The storyteller paused for a moment before shaking his head. "However, I couldn't divine him. He is extremely powerful." Ever since the storyteller appeared, he gave Su Zimo the feeling that he was omniscient, omnipotent and knew everything in the world. However, even the storyteller could not divine Monk Daming's identity. Right now, Su Zimo was probably the only one who truly knew about Monk Daming. He hesitated for a moment and did not reveal Monk Daming's identity to the storyteller. No matter what, Monk Daming had saved his life before. Furthermore, even Su Zimo was not certain whether Monk Daming was truly evil right now. "Let's go to the library to check out what's missing," the storyteller said indifferently and led Su Zimo and the others to the front of the library. He flicked his sleeves gently and the door to the hall opened. On the ground at the entrance laid two figures that were tied up tightly and could not move at all. The two of them seemed to have been cursed and could not speak. They could only stare at the storyteller with widened eyes. "Senior brother, junior brother, you guys." Lin Xuanji froze for a moment. The two of them were the other two disciples of the storyteller, DG and Huang Ji. "Although I know that it's not great, for some reason, I just want to laugh. Ha ha ha." Lin Xuanji burst into laughter. The two cultivators blushed in shame. The storyteller extended his finger and swiped across their bodies through the void. The ropes on both of them snapped instantly. Both of them were at the conjoint body realm and a rope that could bind them was definitely an extraordinary item. But now, it was crippled by the storyteller. The two of them stood up and ran to the storyteller before kneeling down. "Master, I deserve to die for failing to protect the library. Please punish me, Master." DG kowtowed repeatedly. With an ashamed expression, Huang Ji whispered, "Master, I've embarrassed you." Su Zimo lamented internally. The storyteller's evaluation is truly not wrong. DG has a stiff personality and obeys rules rigidly while Huang Ji looks to be kind and honest. "Get up, it's not your fault." The storyteller did not have any intention of blaming them and continued asking, "Do you guys know what he did in the library?" "I don't know." Huang Ji replied honestly. However, that person did not stay in the library for long before leaving. He said that the reason why he came this time round was because he wanted to borrow the Mystic Firmament record to take a look. Once he was done reading it, he would definitely return it and not spread it outside. The Mystic Firmament record. Su Zimo was secretly speechless. That was the establishment foundation of Enigma Palace. It was created by Fairy Ling Long and was all-encompassing, only completed after the Eternal Human Emperor perfected it. To think that Monk Daming would steal it away today. That was a huge fortune. The storyteller did not enter the hall and merely closed his eyes to sense before nodding. Indeed, he took away the mystic firmament record. I deserve to die. I deserve to die. DG knelt down once more and kowtowed furiously. Although his forehead was filled with blood, he had no intention of stopping. Senior brother, hurry and get up. Don't damage your brains. Lin Xuanji hurried forward and pulled DG up forcefully. Foo-foo. The storyteller suddenly laughed. Both DG and Huang Ji were confused and even wanted to die. They did not know how the storyteller could still smile. That's incredible. The storyteller praised. To think that he could come to Enigma Palace and steal the mystic firmament record. Impressive. Impressive. Master, why are you still praising him? The loss of the mystic firmament record is a huge matter. Huang Ji could not help but ask. Forget it, let him be. The storyteller smiled suavely. That person is rather interesting. He merely said that he's borrowing the book to read. Furthermore, he even promised that he would return it without spreading it. Chapter 1469. Origin of Monk Daming. Chapter 1469. Origin of Monk Daming. Standing in front of the library, Su Zimo suddenly recalled something. This matter pertained to a guess he had regarding Monk Daming's identity. If the library truly contained many books that recorded history and many other things as the storyteller had said, there was a high chance he could get the verification he wanted within one of the ancient books in the library. Senior, can I enter the library to take a look? Su Zimo said, I'm not going to look at the cultivation techniques and secret skills of Enigma Palace. I just want to look through the records of history from tens of thousands of years ago and verify some things. How can that do? Before the storyteller could reply, DG glared and said in a deep voice, What's your identity? The library is an important place. It's not a place that an outsider like you can enter casually. Lin Xuanji pouted. Senior brother, stop talking. Didn't an outsider just enter and even steal the mystic firmament record? If anyone else in Enigma Palace knows about this, it'll definitely cause a huge uproar. Although DG was flushed red from the rebuttal, he straightened his neck and argued, It's different. Since we already made a mistake, we can't continue making more mistakes. That's enough. The storyteller waved it off and nodded to Su Zimo. Of course you're qualified to take a look. However, there are many books in the library and there are countless records of history. Which year do you want to take a look at? Why don't you say it and we'll have Xuanji bring you there directly so that you don't have to spend your energy searching. Around 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. Su Zimo replied ambiguously. All right. The storyteller looked at Lin Xuanji. Take Desolate Martial Inn. He glanced sideways and smiled when he saw Demonis G's curious expression. If you're curious, you can follow along and take a look. Master, that can't do. Unable to hold it in, DG stood out once more and said in a deep voice, It's fine if you make an exception once, but how can you do it repeatedly? Where are the rules of the sect? She's the successor of Founder Master Ling Long. Do you think she's qualified? The storyteller glared at DG and blew his beard as he asked. With a stunned expression, DG murmured, That means she's qualified. Kid, you're trying to ascend to the heavens, huh? The storyteller pointed at DG's nose and scolded as he smacked the latter's head. You even dare to boss me around now when I'm trying to do something? You even want to talk to me about sect rules? On the other side, Lin Xuanji waved to Su Zimo and Demonis G. Let's go, I'll take you guys in. After being scolded by the storyteller, DG wilted completely and did not even dare to breathe heavily. As for the storyteller, he looked at the backs of Su Zimo and the other two and stroked his long beard, murmuring, Something major that happened 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. The battle between the Blood Fiend and Monk Daming? In the library. There was a heavenly piercing stone pillar that required dozens of people to wrap around. It stood in the middle of the hall and connected to the entire library. Around the stone pillar were many ancient books. There were even more ancient books and bamboo scrolls on the walls around the hall. Lin Xuanji was rather familiar with this place and brought Su Zimo and Demonis G inside. They only stopped after dozens of steps. Everything that happened around 30,000 to 40,000 years ago is recorded in these ancient books. Take a look. Lin Xuanji pointed to a row of books on the wall. Thank you. Su Zimo expressed his thanks and walked forward, casually picking up an ancient book to browse through. Demoness G closed in as well and picked one up to read. After a long time, Demoness G was getting impatient. Initially, she came in to take a look out of curiosity. To her surprise, the contents of the report were extremely boring and she lost interest after a casual glance. However, Su Zimo continued browsing, as though he was searching for something. Demoness G did not leave either and accompanied him quietly at the side, casually picking up an ancient book to pass time. On the other side, Su Zimo flipped through another ancient book and suddenly stopped after flipping a few pages. This ancient book recorded the battle between Dao Lord Bloodfiend and Monk Daming 40,000 years ago. The records of that battle were similar to what Monk Yuan Bei had said. The two of them fought 3 times but there was no clear victor. After the final battle, both of them went missing and their fates were unknown. They had never appeared till now and should have died. What Su Zimo wanted to know about was not this battle. He wanted to know about the origin of Monk Daming. There was a sentence recorded in the ancient book. Monk Daming was not human and was a remnant of the Heavenly Eye race. He was abandoned by the Heavenly Eye race and taken in by Daming Monastery later on. True enough. That statement verified Su Zimo's speculation on 6 Stars Mountain. Monk Daming was not a human. He was from the Heavenly Eye race. Back when he first met Monk Daming in the Grand Primordium Ancient Temple, Su Zimo caught a vague glimpse of a blood scar on his glabella. However, the scar was covered by Daming Monastery's long hair and was not obvious. It was only until this time round on 6 Stars Mountain when he witnessed Monk Daming fight against the Bloodvine half-martial ancestor with his own eyes that he saw everything clearly. The scar was way too similar to the Heavenly Eye race's Heavenly Eye. That was also the reason why the scar could defend against the Green Lotus Sword and the Essence Spirit secret skill of the Bloodvine half-martial ancestor. That was because Heavenly Eye was the strongest technique of the Heavenly Eye race to begin with. In that case, Monk Daming had yet to truly use his Heavenly Eye trump card. He merely used his Heavenly Eye to defend. It was hard to imagine how devastating and apocalyptic the scene would be if he had attacked with his Heavenly Eye. At the same time, another doubt in Su Zimo's mind was resolved. The skeleton in the stone coffin deep underground was Monk Daming. However, Monk Daming was someone from 40,000 years ago. He was trapped in the stone coffin underground for 40,000 years. Even conjoint body mighty figures with 20,000 years of lifespan would have long died, let alone Dharma characteristic Dao lords. However, Monk Daming did not die. Instead, he appeared in this generation. Although it was partly because of the Mingwang prayer beads, there was no way Monk Daming could have lived for more than 40,000 years. Today, Su Zimo finally understood. That was because Monk Daming was not human to begin with. He was from the Heavenly Eye race. Even though he was a remnant of the Heavenly Eye race, his lifespan at the Dharma characteristic realm was far longer than humans and that was why he could last 40,000 years in the stone coffin. After resolving that doubt, Su Zimo was prepared to leave. Right then, he swept his gaze across and looked at the ancient book in Demoness G's hands. With a thought he asked, "What's in this ancient book of yours?" "It's nothing much, just an unforeseen event of the fiend sex 20,000 years ago." Demoness G shrugged her shoulders casually. 20,000 years ago. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. "Let me take a look." Based on time, there was 1,000 demon tribulation 30,000 years ago. There was the Great Qian Empire War 10,000 years ago. In that case, something major might have happened 20,000 years ago. Chapter 1470. Astral Tribulation. Chapter 1470. Astral Tribulation. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, Su Zimo told Monk Yuan Bei and the red-headed ghost about the bloodface in the 1,000-year blood sea of Thousand Demon Valley. Thereafter, the red-headed ghost mentioned the 1,000 Demon Tribulation. It was said that the battle 30,000 years ago was extremely tragic and not only were the demons of Thousand Demon Valley involved. Even the demons of the other 7 demon regions were implicated. In that battle, countless fiend demons and even demon emperors died. After that battle, the 8 demon regions took huge losses. That was the reason why this battle was known as the 1,000-Demon Tribulation. If the appearance of the Bloodface in the ruins of the Great Qian Empire and the 1,000-Demon Tribulation was not a coincidence. In that case, something major might have happened in Tianhuang mainland 20,000 years ago. Su Zimo took the ancient book Demonis Ji handed him and read it. 6 Fiend Sects. Su Zimo murmured softly. Demonis Ji nodded. Actually, 20,000 years ago, the situation in Tianhuang mainland was divided between the 9 immortal sects, 8 Buddhist monasteries and 6 fiend sections. Su Zimo knew about the 8 Buddhist monasteries. The 2 super sects of the Buddhist monasteries, Daming Monastery and Fahua Monastery, were destroyed in the Battle of the Great Qian Empire 10,000 years ago and turned into the current 6 Buddhist monasteries. He truly did not know about the 6 fiend sections. Demonis Ji said, 20,000 years ago, there was no Heavenly Dipper sect among the 9 immortal sections. Instead, there was another major sect, the Astral sect. Also, Malevolent Earth sect was not among the fiend sections. Later on, Astral Emperor of Astral sect failed his tribulation and was electrocuted into ashes by the Heavenly Tribulation, leading to a crisis for Astral sect. The terror of tribulation transcendence was such that even emperors would die with their essence spirits destroyed if they were careless. Demonis Ji continued, at that critical juncture, Patriarch Astral was ambushed by a patriarch of the fiend sects and nearly died. Enraged, he triggered a massive battle against the fiend sects. In that battle, 5 of the 9 immortal sects were embroiled in it. As for the 6 fiend sects, they took part and fought till the end, even escalating to a fight between emperors. As he listened to Demonis Ji's description, Su Zimo browsed through the ancient books and matched them. The ancient books recorded that more than 30 Mahayana patriarchs of the immortal and fiend sects died in this battle, and even Patriarch Astral died. Even 3 emperors were dead. At that point, Su Zimo was secretly speechless. The foundation of a super sect was truly terrifying. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo rarely saw Mahayana patriarchs because he had not cultivated to that level. After all, Mahayana patriarchs had a lifespan of 100,000 years. Even if the super sects could only produce one every 10,000 years, after 100,000 years, they would have 10. Demonis Ji sighed. In the end, the Dharma Emperor of the Buddhist monasteries and the others mediated and managed to calm the battle down. Even so, that battle caused great damage to the fiend sections. As for the 9 immortal sects, Astral sect was destroyed and split into 2 major sects. One of them is the current Heavenly Dipper sect of the 9 immortal sects and the other is Malevolent Earth sect of the 7 fiend sections. At that point, Su Zimo was enlightened. Back when he first met Demonis Ji, she had already looked down on Malevolent Earth sect and said that Malevolent Earth sect was not a true fiend sect. But now he finally understood. Malevolent Earth sect was formerly Astral sect of the immortal sects. That battle could be considered as a catastrophe for the immortal and fiend sections. Astral sect was even split into 2 and everything was referred to by the later generations as the Astral Tribulation. After a while, Demonis Ji saw that Su Zimo was still buried in the ancient book, reading it repeatedly as though he was searching for something. Zimo, what are you looking for? Demonis Ji asked. Su Zimo replied, I'm looking for the problem behind this battle. What do you mean? Demonis Ji was puzzled. Su Zimo did not reply. After flipping through the ancient book a few times, he asked, who was the patriarch of the fiend sects who attacked Patriarch Astral? I'm not sure. Demonis Ji shook her head. Su Zimo pointed to the ancient book in his hands. That's the problem. Even the ancient books of Enigma Palace have no record of this patriarch of the fiend sects. This matter was the reason for the Astral Tribulation, but nobody knew who this patriarch of the fiend sects was. Demonis Ji frowned. What can that prove? This must be absolutely true. Otherwise, Patriarch Astral wouldn't have been enraged and launched a massive battle against the fiend sects. Su Zimo did not argue. In truth, it was the same as the Great Qian catastrophe. Be it the 1,000 demon or astral tribulations, the 2 calamities carried the same strangeness. For the Great Qian catastrophe, Monk Yuan Bei and the red-headed ghost, 2 people who witnessed it personally, speculated with one another and Dai Yu intervened. Later on, they uncovered the strangeness behind the Great Qian catastrophe. As for the 1,000 demon and astral tribulations, they broke out 20,000 to 30,000 years ago. Anyone who had experienced both calamities personally would have died a long time ago. Even if Su Zimo could sense that something was amiss with the two calamities, he could not discover the true problem. The truth of the past might be buried with time. However, this matter confirmed his guess. The 1,000 demon tribulation, astral tribulation and Great Qian catastrophe were no coincidences. Now that I think about it, another 10,000 years have passed since the Great Qian catastrophe. Su Zimo murmured softly with a grim expression. The dangers of Tianhuang mainland did not merely come from the primordial races. There was also a pair of invisible bloodhands that were stirring the clouds and manipulating all living beings. Let's leave this place. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo buried those thoughts in his heart and left the library with Demonis G. The storyteller did not leave and stood at the entrance of the hall, gazing into the distance in deep thought. Ming Zhen, Little Fatty, Shi Jian and Yen Beichen were gone. It was likely that the cultivators of Enigma Palace had already arranged for them to rest. You found the answer you wanted? The storyteller glanced sideways and asked with a smile. Su Zimo nodded. Initially, the reason why he entered the library was because he wanted to find out the secret behind monk daming. To think that he even found out about the catastrophe 20,000 years ago by accident. You were the one who destroyed the Bloodvine race on 6 Stars Mountain, right? The storyteller asked. Yes. Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before nodding. Half of it was done by monk daming. However, since monk daming did not want to reveal himself, Su Zimo did not take the initiative to mention him. Why did you come directly to Enigma Palace after 6 Stars Mountain? The storyteller asked again. Su Zimo was just about to talk about this matter as he spoke in a deep voice. The Bloodvine race set a killing badge on me. Someone told me that Enigma Palace might be able to help me resolve it. The storyteller's expression changed starkly as he spun around. A gray fog appeared in the storyteller's eyes, as though he could see through all the secrets on Su Zimo. Indeed. The mist in the storyteller's eyes gradually dispersed as he frowned. Extending his palm, he divined with his fingers and a divine light flashed through his eyes as he hollered. Not good. Chapter 1471. Blood Rebirth. Chapter 1471. Blood Rebirth. Senior, what's wrong? Su Zimo asked hurriedly. The feelings that the storyteller gave off were always that he was either teasing, scolding, being calm and composed or decisive to kill. However, he had never had such an expression. The Bloodvine race is here. After saying that, the storyteller waved both hands in front of him. Instantly, a mysterious and powerful might filled the void, blanketing the skies and enveloping the entire Enigma Palace. That power did not have a strong killing intent. Instead, it seemed mysterious and ethereal. However, against that power, Su Zimo felt as insignificant as a speck of dust that could be drowned at any moment. All of you, head to the library and don't come out. Waving his sleeves, the storyteller pushed Su Zimo and Demonis G back into the library and with a boom, the door to the library closed. In the library, Su Zimo held his breath and looked nervous. Judging from the storyteller's stance, the people from the Bloodvine race this time round were definitely not easy to deal with. There was at least an Ancestor Realm expert. Some Ancestor Realm experts of the primordial races could even fight against emperors of the human race. Swoosh! Right then, a large blood-colored cloud floated over from the distant horizon and surged over at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it arrived before Enigma Palace. Mahayana Realm. Even though they were hiding in the library, Su Zimo and Demonis G could still sense the terrifying blood stench outside. It was far beyond the conjoint body realm. In the Battle of 6 Stars Mountain, Tang Lingzi and more than 10,000 Bloodvine race beings died without a single survivor. Monk Daming said that it was highly likely a patriarch of the Bloodvine race would be alarmed over this matter. He was right again. In order to kill a conjoint body mighty figure like Su Zimo, the Bloodvine race sent out a Mahayana patriarch. Su Zimo listened intently with a sense of nervousness. After all, he was the one who attracted the Bloodvine race. If a huge battle that resulted in the death of many cultivators were to break out in front of Enigma Palace, he would definitely feel extremely guilty. Right then, a small hand took the initiative to tug at his palm. It was warm and soft, calming his mind gradually. Glancing sideways, Suzimo caught sight of Demonis G's bright eyes. Those eyes that could bewitch the masses revealed a hint of comfort and gentleness at the moment. It's fine, senior storyteller is around. Demonis G sent a voice transmission secretly. Suzimo nodded and smiled. In the skies in front of Enigma Palace, a crack appeared on the blood-colored clouds and an ancient blood-colored vine extended from within. At the top of the blood vines, a human face without eyes and nose opened its mouth, revealing menacing fangs that shone with a cold glint. The blood vine seemed to be surveying something within Enigma Palace, scanning it over and over again. However, the blood vine seemed to know something and hovered outside the exquisite killing formation the entire time, not daring to take a single step in. The commotion here had already attracted many Enigma Palace cultivators. Humph! The storyteller's figure suddenly appeared in midair. What are you doing here at Enigma Palace, Patriarch Bloodfortune? He glared coldly at the bloodvine in midair and barked. What are you waiting for? Scram! The storyteller was extremely domineering and did not stand on courtesy. With a holler from the storyteller, the blood-colored clouds dispersed and the bloodvine retracted, turning into a figure that stood in midair in the blink of an eye. Patriarch Bloodfortune did not look big and was merely middle-aged. However, his eyes were filled with a strong bloodlust and killing intent and his lips were bloodshot. Hee hee. Patriarch Bloodfortune let out a strange laughter. So, the Mystic Emperor is the one guarding this place. How unfortunate. Let's not beat around the bush. Desolate Marshal is in Enigma Palace, right? Can't you see for yourself whether he's in Enigma Palace? The storyteller was expressionless as he sneered. Since you guys released the killing badge on him, even with your capabilities, you're unable to find him, Patriarch Bloodfortune. Hee hee. Patriarch Bloodfortune glared at the storyteller coldly and smiled. Earlier on, I even caught sight of the killing badge's aura around here. However, for some unknown reason, it vanished in the blink of an eye. Go and look for it then. Don't stay at Enigma Palace, scram. The storyteller cursed once more with a chilling killing intent in his eyes. It was as though he was prepared to attack the next moment. Sensing something, Patriarch Bloodfortune retreated a few steps and sneered, Mystic Emperor, let me advise you not to get involved in this mess. That lad, Desolate Marshal, is already hunted by our primordial 6 races. Although I'm unable to detect Desolate Marshal's aura here today, if an emperor of our Bloodvine race comes, he'll definitely be able to locate Desolate Marshal. If we discover Desolate Marshal's location in Enigma Palace at that time, you'll be prepared to endure the wrath of the primordial 6 races. How noisy! Suddenly, the storyteller extended his palm and swiped viciously in the direction of Patriarch Bloodfortune, shouting softly, "Great ripping technique!" Swoosh! Although the storyteller merely waved his hand simply, an extremely terrifying power burst forth from his palm and the entire void was torn into 2. It's a great divine power. Patriarch Bloodfortune's expression changed starkly as he turned to flee. Even so, he was still a step slower. He had not expected the storyteller to be so domineering that the latter wanted to suppress him without a second word. The great divine power descended on him instantly. Instantly, his body was shredded into countless pieces and blood spewed everywhere. Under the power of that great divine power, the shattered flesh continued to explode and turned into blood mists. This could already be considered as tearing his corpse apart. Even conjoint body mighty figures who could regrow severed limbs wouldn't be able to heal from this. However, right then, a blood beam surged into the skies from the blood mist and escaped into the distance. The blood mist in midair surged towards the blood beam at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, Patriarch Bloodfortune's body recovered completely. The cultivators of Enigma Palace exclaimed when they saw that. This must be a divine power that can only be comprehended at the Mahayana realm, blood rebirth. How terrifying! It's too difficult to kill a Mahayana patriarch. Conjoint body mighty figures had boundless dermic powers and could regrow severed limbs. At the Mahayana realm, one would possess divine powers. As long as their essence spirits were not destroyed, they could be reborn even with a single drop of blood, let alone a severed arm. Earlier on, Patriarch Bloodfortune released the divine power of blood rebirth. Mystic Emperor, don't be smug. The Bloodvine race will return. Although Patriarch Bloodfortune had already fled far away, his voice was filled with hatred and vengefulness. The storyteller had an indifferent expression as he looked at the fleeing blood beam without chasing after it. Everyone disperse. He returned to Enigma Palace and remarked casually. The group of cultivators from Enigma Palace dispersed one after another, but all of them were still discussing in hushed voices excitedly. Chapter 1472. Kunlun Ruins. Chapter 1472. Kunlun Ruins. Although Su Zimo and Demonis Ji were hiding in the library, they could still sense the situation outside using their spirit consciousnesses. Both of them exchanged glances and could see the shock in the other's eyes. The power of the Mahayana realm was completely beyond the other realms. For those beneath Golden Core realm, they would mostly fight in melee combat with spirit arts. There were many more techniques above the Golden Core realm such as dermic arts, secret skills, heaven and earth dharma characteristics and essence spirit fights. For Mahayana patriarchs, divine powers were the strongest. Divine powers were also the biggest difference between ancestor realm experts and conjoint body mighty figures. Although the divine power released by the storyteller did not look like anything much, its might was extremely terrifying. Even a Bloodvine patriarch's body was torn into a blood mist. It's fine now, come on out. Just as Su Zimo and Demonis Ji were letting their imaginations run wild, the voice of the storyteller sounded and the door to the library opened. Thank you for saving me, Senior. Su Zimo came before the storyteller and bowed deeply. It's nothing. The storyteller shook his head slightly, but there was still a hint of worry on his face. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he vaguely guessed something. He probed, Senior, Enigma Palace won't be able to dispel the killing badge on me either, right? Yes. The storyteller did not hide anything and nodded. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled the scene when Patriarch Bloodfortune arrived outside Enigma Palace. The latter did not seem entirely certain that Su Zimo was in Enigma Palace either. Right then, the storyteller explained, when I saw the killing badge on your body, I used a divine power to seal your aura temporarily, concealing the heavenly secrets. Suddenly, Su Zimo was enlightened. After realizing that something was amiss, the storyteller waved both hands in front of him and released a boundless energy that enveloped the skies of Enigma Palace. So the storyteller had already released a divine power at that time. The storyteller said, with this divine power, even Mahayana patriarchs of the primordial races won't be able to discover you. However, after a brief pause, he continued, if emperors of the Bloodvine or Heavenly Eye race were to arrive, my divine power would probably be exposed. Su Zimo's eyes lit up. In Tianhuang mainland, as an emperor, the storyteller was definitely one of the strongest cultivators he had encountered so far. However, even the storyteller and Enigma Palace could not do anything about it. This meant that other sects like Ethereal Peak and 100 Refinement sect would be even more helpless. Although Tianhuang mainland was huge, there was nowhere he could hide with the killing badge. What should we do then? Demonis Ji was a little anxious. Senior, you're divinely powerful. You definitely have a solution. Senior, since Enigma Palace doesn't have a way either, I'll leave tomorrow. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and said in a deep voice. To be fair, he had no clue where he should go next either. However, he would not benefit from staying in Enigma Palace apart from implicating it. To think that I would be in such a state after the battle at 6 Stars Mountain. Su Zimo murmured internally. Although he obtained the Ashoka wood, he also had the killing badge planted on him and would eventually be hunted down by the Bloodvine race. There was no time or place for him to refine and cultivate it. The outcome of this Green Lotus true body was probably decided. This was a hopeless situation. The storyteller looked at Su Zimo deeply and suddenly asked, do you regret it? Su Zimo was stunned for a moment before he understood that the storyteller was asking him if he regretted the battle at 6 Stars Mountain. He burst into laughter and shook his head. I don't. Even if I have to do it again, I would have killed my way through 6 Stars Mountain. As expected of Desolate Marshal. The storyteller nodded in satisfaction and praised. Actually, there's still a way for you to dispel the killing badge on your body and get out of this deadly situation, suddenly he said. Delighted, Su Zimo asked hurriedly, "Senior, please explain." The storyteller narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "There's an unknown place in Tianhuang mainland that even Mahayana patriarchs and the various emperors don't dare to step foot into." "Ah," Su Zimo asked, "even emperors of the primordial races don't dare to step foot in?" "That's a forbidden ground for the primordial races." The storyteller's words were shocking. In the cultivation world, the 9 forbidden grounds for the human race actually corresponded to the habitat of the primordial 9 races. But now, for the first time, Su Zimo was hearing of a place in Tianhuang mainland that was a forbidden ground for the primordial races such that even their emperors won't dare to step foot in. "Senior, are you referring to that place?" As though she recalled something, Demoness Ji looked to the west instinctively. "That's right." The storyteller nodded. "Extreme west, Kunlun ruins." Kunlun ruins. Su Zimo murmured softly. That was a name that was extremely foreign to him. "What is that place?" He could not help but ask. "Nobody knows what's there or what that place even is." The storyteller shook his head. "However, one thing is certain. That was the final battlefield of the Primordial War." The Primordial War. Su Zimo was shocked. The storyteller said in a deep voice, "To be precise, that place was originally called Kunlun, but because of an apocalyptic battle that turned into a massive ruin, it was later known as the Kunlun Ruin." It said that in the Primordial War, the taboo Dragon Phoenix and Kuan Peng led 8 primordial races and countless races to attack Kunlun, fighting against the 10,000 races led by the taboo Hoth. Hold on. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he suddenly asked, "Senior, shouldn't it be the primordial 9 races?" The storyteller shook his head. According to the records of founder Master Ling Long, there were only 8 primordial races at the start of the primordial era. The god race only appeared in the late stage of the primordial era and weren't strong enough at the time of the primordial war. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. For some unknown reason, he had a feeling that something unusual was hidden within. However, he could not figure it out at the moment. The storyteller's description of the primordial war was somewhat different from the Illumination Dragon Grand Elder. After all, that was something from the primordial era. Even for the 1,000-demon tribulation and astral tribulation that happened 20,000 to 30,000 years ago, it was difficult to know the truth, let alone a war that happened countless years ago. The only thing they were certain of was that the primordial war was indeed extremely tragic. It was much more tragic than the war between the human race and the primordial 9 races in the ancient era. Countless races were wiped out in the primordial war. Indeed, all 3 taboos died in that battle as well. Because of that, the primordial 9 races suffered immense losses. Because of that, the primordial era came to an end. Thereafter, it entered the ancient era where humans took advantage of the situation to rise and the cultivation civilization flourished, welcoming a glorious era. Finally, an ancient war against the primordial 9 races broke out. Chapter 1473. Divine Powers. Chapter 1473. Divine Powers. The voice of the storyteller continued ringing. There were way too many experts that died in the Kunlun ruins. Countless of them. Countless divine powers were released in that unprecedented battle. Even though the Kunlun mountain range was destroyed, there are still extremely terrifying divine powers remaining in the ruins that last forever. Su Zimo was secretly alarmed. In the primordial war, countless races were destroyed and the primordial 9 races suffered immense losses with all 3 taboos dead. How vast and terrifying were the remaining divine powers in the Kunlun ruins? It was completely unimaginable. The storyteller said, "These terrifying divine powers form an extremely unique domain. Any Mahayana patriarch that enters it will easily cause a divine power storm." Divine power storm. Su Zimo and Demoness Ji exchanged glances. Given their cultivation realms, it was difficult for them to imagine what sort of an existence the so-called divine power storm was. In fact, neither of them knew much about divine powers. The storyteller said in a deep voice, "A Mahayana patriarch might be able to survive if a lesser divine power storm is triggered. However, if a greater divine power storm is triggered, they'll be doomed. If it's a supreme divine power storm, even emperors would be shredded easily upon entering." Lesser and greater divine powers. Su Zimo was even more puzzled. In the ancient era, when the Kunlun ruins was just formed, more than 10 Mahayana patriarchs and 2 emperors of the primordial races wanted to explore it. The storyteller said, unfortunately, all of them were annihilated. Pest. Su Zimo gasped. In that case, it was no exaggeration that the Kunlun ruins was a forbidden ground for the primordial races. Thereafter, every tens of thousands of years, there would be experts of the primordial races who were indignant and wanted to step into the Kunlun ruins. After all, there were way too many treasures left in the ruins in the primordial war. It was hard to imagine. Su Zimo nodded. In the primordial war, many races were destroyed and countless experts died. The treasures left behind by those experts became ownerless. If he could take out all the treasures in the ruins, the foundation of the 9 immortal sects, 8 demon races, 7 fiend sects and 6 Buddhist monasteries combined might not even be able to compare to it. The storyteller said, however, among the many experts of the primordial races that entered the Kunlun ruins over the years, only one of them managed to survive and was scared half to death. From then on, no primordial race dared to step foot into the ruins. What about Mahayana patriarchs of the human race? Su Zimo asked curiously. They can't enter either. The storyteller shook his head and sounded certain. Needless to say, from the ancient era till now, there were definitely countless human patriarchs who entered but failed to return alive. Demonist G thought for a moment and said, since Mahayana patriarchs can't enter, can Dharma-characteristic Tao lords or perhaps conjoint body mighty figures enter? Yes. The storyteller nodded. Indeed, for cultivators below the Mahayana realm, they won't trigger a divine power storm upon entering. However, the Kunlun ruins is extremely treacherous with countless dangers. There were indeed cultivators beneath the Mahayana realm that ventured in to explore, and only very few of them returned alive. Furthermore, those people did not even reach the depths of the Kunlun ruins and could not hang on any longer after circling around the outer perimeter. After a moment of silence, the storyteller said, before founder Master Ling Long entered the Mahayana realm, she braved immense danger to enter the Kunlun ruins for a primordial divine herb. According to the records of founder Master Ling Long, the Kunlun ruins does not only contain treasures left behind by experts of the past, there are even countless spirit herbs and trees from the primordial era. Of course, apart from that, there are also many races that went extinct in the primordial war. Those living beings mingled and reproduced with one another in the Kunlun ruins. They adapted to the environment and became a new race. Founder Master Ling Long referred to them as the Kunlun race. Su Zimo gradually understood. The Kunlun race was not a new race, but a race that was fused with various major races. There might be humans, demon beasts and even vegetation. The Kunlun ruins was like a place isolated from the outside world. The Kunlun race was the master of that world. They would not leave the Kunlun ruins and were extremely resistant towards the outside world as well. If they discovered any outsiders barging in, they would definitely not let the outsiders off. Desolate Marshal. The storyteller said in a deep voice, the Kunlun ruins is a unique domain formed by divine powers left behind from the primordial era. Cultivate there for a long time and the killing badge within your body will definitely dissipate gradually. If you enter the Kunlun ruins, you must be careful and avoid the Kunlun race. Look for a secret and safe place at the outer perimeter of the Kunlun ruins and cultivate diligently, so that you can advance to the Mahayana realm as soon as possible. Su Zimo nodded and bowed deeply. Thank you for your guidance, Senior. The reason why Enigma Palace did not have much of an understanding towards the Kunlun ruins was because founder Master Ling Long made a trip there in the past and left behind precious records. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo asked again, Senior, what were the lesser and greater divine powers that you mentioned earlier on? The storyteller smiled gently. You'll know about these things once you advance to the Mahayana realm. However, it doesn't hurt to let you know beforehand. Divine powers can be divided into 3 types, namely lesser, greater and supreme divine powers. Naturally, the power of those divine powers increase in succession. Su Zimo nodded to himself and asked, the divine power that Patriarch Bloodfortune released earlier on, the one that could reconstruct his body with a single drop of blood, what is it under? That's one of the lesser divine powers. The storyteller said indifferently. Su Zimo and Demonist G's heart skipped a beat. Even a powerful method such as blood rebirth was merely a lesser divine power. One could only imagine how frightening the might of a greater or supreme divine power would be. The storyteller said, there are 10,000 known lesser divine powers and thousands of greater divine powers. However, there are only dozens of known supreme divine powers. Under normal circumstances, even the combined power of more than 10 lesser divine powers won't be a match for a single greater divine power. Even 100 greater divine powers combined can't match a single supreme divine power. Although there were only 3 levels of divine powers, the difference in strength was exponential. After a brief pause, the storyteller said hesitantly, of course, Founder Master Ling Long once mentioned that there might perhaps be a type of divine power that was even above supreme divine powers. It's the peerless divine powers. Peerless meant that no divine powers could compare to it. Not even supreme divine powers. Of course, Founder Master Ling Long merely heard of that as well. After all, from the primordial era till now, there had never been any peerless divine powers that appeared. The storyteller smiled. If there was truly such a divine power, even Tianhuang mainland would be turned into ruins if it was released. The saying of peerless divine powers is truly way too illusory. Chapter 1474. 3 Calamities of Daoism. Chapter 1474. 3 Calamities of Daoism. Throughout history, there have been millions of human cultivators and countless conjoint body mighty figures. However, only a rare few manage to advance to the Mahayana realm and comprehend divine powers to become a patriarch. Do you know why? The storyteller asked. Divine power tribulation? Su Zimo made an attempt to reply. He had once heard someone mention that in order to advance to the Mahayana realm from the conjoint body realm, one had to undergo a tribulation, the divine power tribulation. Throughout history, this divine power tribulation had buried countless paragons and monster incarnates. The owners of the 30-odd stone statues in the Dao Inheritance ground were all the most famous paragons and monster incarnates of Tianhuang mainland in the past. However, these people were still unable to take the final step and were stuck before the Mahayana realm, dying with regrets. The storyteller had a slightly emotional expression as he nodded. Cultivation is something that defies the heavens to begin with. In this period of time, one will experience countless dangers. These dangers either originate from their own mental demons or from the killing intent of the outside world. However, there has never been any danger that can be called a tribulation. Previously, be it in terms of breaking through from golden core, nascent soul or void reversion realm, one would encounter danger but it could not be considered as a tribulation. For something to be called a tribulation, it must mean that it was extremely difficult to survive and one would most likely die. The storyteller said slowly, the divine power tribulation refers to the 3 calamities of Daoism: wind, fire and thunder. Su Zimo's heart stirred. It felt familiar. The storyteller smiled. Seems like you've thought of the Dao Inheritance ground as well. Su Zimo nodded. There was a 3 tribulations domain in the Dao Inheritance ground and there were 3 tribulations. The Yin Wind Tribulation, the Karmic Flame Tribulation and the Thunder Tribulation. The storyteller said, back then, there were many paragons and monster incarnates who left their legacies there. Since 3 tribulations were created, how could they have been set casually? There was a deeper meaning to it. A look of realization flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. However, the storyteller changed the topic. The 3 calamities of the divine power tribulation are sent down by heaven and earth and are even more terrifying than the 3 tribulations domain. That wind is no ordinary wind. It's the heavenly dipper wind. Sharp as an awl and lethal as a blade, it enters through the head and spreads through the 5 viscera, 6 bowels, 9 orifices, flesh and hair, destroying everything along its way. The heavenly dipper wind penetrates everything and if the essence spirit isn't refined enough, it will be dispersed as well. 1. Su Zimo and Demoness Ji were secretly alarmed. The fire is no ordinary fire either. It's the earth malevolent fire. Born from beneath one's feet, it surges right through their glabella. If one's body isn't strong or their bloodline isn't robust enough, their organs would turn into ashes while their limbs would rot instantly. 10,000 years of cultivation would turn into ashes completely. 1. The storyteller continued, that thunder isn't the ordinary thunder of the mortal realm either. It's the 5 elements divine thunder. The gung metal, wood, gue water, Bing Fire and Wu Earth divine thunders would crash upon one. Any single mistake and their soul would be dispersed. 1. If they can't pass through the 3 calamities, their bodies and essence spirits will be destroyed without any corpse remaining. Of course, if they manage to survive the tribulation of the 3 calamities, they would comprehend a divine power, blood rebirth. Su Zimo finally understood. The reason why every Mahayana patriarch knew blood rebirth was because they could comprehend that divine power through the baptism of the 3 calamities. Suddenly, Su Zimo recalled a doubt he had in the past and could not help but ask. Senior, Mahayana patriarchs of the cultivation world rarely appear. Are they all in seclusion in the various major sects? Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had encountered too few Mahayana patriarchs, which was a little strange. It was as though all the Mahayana patriarchs were hiding in a place and would not come out unless something major happened. When something happened to Enigma Palace this time round, Patriarch Qing Cheng seemed like he returned from another place as well. The storyteller said, typically, after entering the Mahayana realm, one would no longer bother about dharmic treasures or secret skills. All Mahayana patriarchs only have a single goal, and that is to comprehend divine powers as much as possible. Once you advance to the Mahayana realm, if you want to raise your cultivation and combat strength, you have to comprehend divine powers. With every divine power comprehended, one's essence spirit, body and bloodline will be baptized by the power of divine powers, and their combat strength will increase significantly. In the cultivation world, the best place to comprehend divine powers is not in Tianhuang mainland, but... At that point, the storyteller suddenly paused and looked at Su Zimo with a fake smile, clearly testing the latter. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. From the tone of the storyteller, this was definitely a place he knew. Furthermore, there was a high chance it was a familiar place. However, why would a place he was familiar with become a place for patriarchs to comprehend divine powers? Suddenly, a thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind as he blurted, "The ancient battlefield." The ancient battlefield was a dimension of its own and was a broken world. Su Zimo had been to the elementary and intermediate ancient battlefields, but he had never heard any rumors about the advanced ancient battlefield. Now that he thought about it, the place where these patriarchs had the highest chance of comprehending divine powers was the advanced ancient battlefield. Su Zimo replied, "If I'm not wrong, the final ranking of the 3 Enigma rankings, the divine powers ranking, should also be in this advanced ancient battlefield." That's right. A look of admiration flashed through the storyteller's eyes as he nodded slightly. There were many divine powers left behind in this final ancient battlefield. Those divine powers could be in some ruins, at some mountain peak, or among the trees and grass. Actually, there are even more divine powers remaining in the Kunlun ruins, and they're even more terrifying. However, because the primordial war was way too intense and the environment there was extremely sensitive, Mahayana patriarchs would trigger a divine power storm the moment they stepped in. They won't even be able to survive the divine power storm, let alone comprehend the divine powers. Compared to that, the environment of the ancient battlefield is relatively mild. As long as one can discover the remnant of any divine powers, they can comprehend it. Su Zimo understood. In order to increase their cultivation and combat strength, Mahayana patriarchs of the cultivation world searched and comprehended divine powers in the ancient battlefield. During this process, they would naturally not bother about the strifes of the cultivation world. After all, it was not easy to find a divine power. The process of comprehending a divine power was even harder. That was the reason why patriarchs rarely appeared, and cultivators of the sect would not alarm them unless a major calamity befell the sect. Only Mahayana patriarchs can enter that ancient battlefield. Suddenly, Su Zimo asked. The storyteller shook his head. That's not a hard rule. However, given your current physical body and essence spirit, you won't be able to withstand a divine power if you forcefully comprehend it. The storyteller saw through Su Zimo's intentions and knew that the latter wanted to comprehend divine powers as soon as possible and advance to the ancestor realm. However, there were no shortcuts to cultivation. The storyteller said, if you want to comprehend divine powers, your body and essence spirit have to reach a certain level. A grade 7 creation green lotus is definitely not enough. Chapter 1475. Deceive the World. Chapter 1475. Deceive the World. In other words, the old man was implying that Su Zimo's Green Lotus true body had to grow to grade 8 if he wanted to enter the advanced ancient battlefield. A grade 8 creation Green Lotus was extremely difficult to nurture, and in the ancient era, only the Buddha Emperor had it. Even if Su Zimo were to absorb the large chunk of Ashoka wood completely, it would be difficult for his Green Lotus true body to transform to grade 8. However, there was still a chance. The creation Green Lotus had already fused with his body and bloodline. As long as his cultivation increased, the Green Lotus true body would grow. Although the Kunlun ruins were filled with danger, there were countless treasures. Furthermore, experts of the primordial races did not dare to enter the ruins. As long as he could avoid the danger of the Kunlun ruins, he could cultivate there forever. This was a rare opportunity and cultivation ground for Su Zimo. You guys can rest here for a few days. The storyteller smiled gently. That divine power of mine can still conceal everything for a few more days. At the very least, you'll be safe in Enigma Palace during this period of time. Senior, what's the name of your divine power? Su Zimo asked curiously. Deceive the world. The storyteller said slowly, it's a supreme divine power. Ah! Su Zimo and Demonis exclaimed. The two of them were fortunate enough to witness a supreme divine power personally, and were both shocked and delighted. The storyteller said, there are many types of supreme divine powers, and all of them focus on different aspects. Some of them focus on movement techniques while others on killing. For Deceive the world, it's the #1 method of concealing the heavenly secrets. For example, Everlasting Vitality focuses on healing. Sleeve Universe focuses on encompassing and shifting space. For supreme divine powers such as Incinerating Firmament Boiling Sea, 6 Paths of Reincarnation, Firmament Slash and Divine Punishment, they lean towards killing. Incinerating Firmament Boiling Sea. Sleeve Universe. 6 Paths of Reincarnation. Su Zimo's gaze intensified when he heard that. He was getting closer to these legendary powers. Do you know what's the difference between Mahayana patriarchs and emperors? The storyteller asked again, what sort of patriarchs are able to become emperors? Su Zimo exchanged glances with Demonis, and both of them shook their heads. The comprehension of a supreme divine power. The storyteller said, one can only be conferred the title and become a true emperor upon comprehension of a supreme divine power. Su Zimo's eyes revealed a look of realization. It was no wonder why Hermit once said that even emperors were at the Mahayana realm. The reason why a patriarch was referred to as an emperor was because they had comprehended a supreme divine power. The storyteller continued, the reason why there's a difference in strength between emperors is because the focus of the supreme divine powers they comprehend is different. For example, back then, the supreme divine power comprehended by the Dharma Emperor was Everlasting Vitality, and it was focused on healing. Eventually, he could not defeat the Ancestor Realm Illumination Dragon still. At that point, Su Zimo sighed internally. Even the storyteller did not know the truth about what happened at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley back then. The reason why the Dharma Emperor sacrificed his remaining lifespan to save the red-headed ghost was because he did not want a huge battle between the dragon race and the human race to repeat the massacre. Of course, if the difference is merely in the focus of the comprehended divine power, the variation in combat strength won't be too great. The storyteller said, if anyone could comprehend a second, third, or even more supreme divine powers, their combat strength would increase in folds. That's way too difficult. Demonis shook her head. It was already extremely rare for someone to comprehend a single supreme divine power and become an emperor, let alone 2, 3 or more. There would always be a time when one was exhausted. Even emperors did not have that much time and energy. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly asked, how many supreme divine powers did the eternal human emperor comprehend in the past? Demonis let out a curious expression as well. 6 of them. The storyteller said slowly. Su Zimo and Demonis were shocked. The storyteller said, ever since the ancient era, there have been many paragons and monster incarnates. Their achievements may even surpass the human emperor. Su Zimo nodded. For people like him and the fallen Diin, their accomplishments at the Golden Core realm had already surpassed the human emperor. However, among those monster incarnates, few could become emperors. None of them could even compare to him, let alone surpass him in the end. Suddenly, Daoism G asked, how many supreme divine powers did Fiend Emperor Hatred comprehend in the past? 5. The storyteller said, however, given the Fiend Emperor Hatred's talent, he should have been able to comprehend a sixth one and stand shoulder to shoulder with the human emperor if he hadn't committed suicide. As for the remaining Buddha, Sword, Saber and Thunder Emperors, they merely comprehended 3 supreme divine powers. Most of the ancient emperors merely comprehended a single supreme divine power. What a stark difference! Xueqi was secretly alarmed. Even for renowned emperors such as the Buddha and Sword Emperors, they were 2 supreme divine powers apart from Fiend Emperor Hatred. The difference between them and the human emperor was even greater. The storyteller said, therefore, without the eternal human emperor, the human race would have definitely lost the ancient war. Legend has it that in the ancient war, the human emperor overturned the entire situation single-handedly. But now, Xueqi knew that the legend was not exaggerated at all. He thought for a moment and asked in a deep voice, what's the max number of supreme divine powers comprehended by the emperors of the human race in this generation? Probably 3. The storyteller sighed gently. Xueqi finally understood the pessimism of the storyteller. The strength of the human race in this generation was truly way too inferior compared to the ancient era. In the ancient war, even with the human emperor, the human race merely secured a tragic victory, let alone this generation. Don't think about such things first. The storyteller looked at Xueqi and said in a deep voice, right now, the most important thing for you is to cultivate as soon as possible and grow further. I understand. Xueqi nodded. The storyteller left after a few more reminders and Xueqi stayed in Enigma Palace temporarily alongside Daoism G. Yan Beichen's injuries gradually healed. In a few days, he had mostly recovered. However, the wound in his heart could no longer be healed. His eyes were still dead without any luster. Xueqi sighed internally. As he had expected, after Yan Beichen killed Heavenly Secrets, he lost the obsession in his heart and could no longer find any hope of surviving. Once he left, Yan Beichen would most probably commit suicide. Xueqi wanted to console him but realized that he did not know where to start. At that moment, any consolation seemed powerless. After a long silence, Xueqi said, Brother Yan, have you ever considered the fact that although it's not present in Tianhuang mainland, there might be a mysterious power in the upper world that could revive fellow Daoist Qin? The reason why I'm in my current state is because of a woman from the upper world who changed my fate for me. Brother Yan, I believe that the power of the upper world can also control life and death. 1. Everyone has to have a goal to survive. My goal is to ascend to the upper world and follow in her footsteps so that I can stand shoulder to shoulder with her. At the mention of that, Xueqi's gaze was resolute and he seemed to shine. At the side, Daoism G pursed her lips and her eyes dimmed momentarily at the sight of that. Everyone has to have a goal to survive. Suddenly, Yan Beichen murmured softly and his eyes flickered. Right then, Lin Xuanji pushed the door open and entered. Brother Su, you have visitors. Chapter 1476. Peerless Asura. Chapter 1476. Peerless Asura. Visitors. Xueqi was momentarily stunned. Given how relaxed Lin Xuanji was, it was clear they were not enemies. Right now, he was in an extremely dangerous situation and was hunted down by the primordial 6 races. Unless they were old friends, who would dare to look for him at a time like this? Right then, 2 people appeared at the entrance. When he saw the 2 of them, Xueqi could not help but laugh. He hurried forward and bowed to one of them with cupped fists. Greetings, Master. That person was none other than mighty figure Extreme Fire of 100 Refinement Sect. The other person was a young lady in her prime. Her wave-shaped hair fell to her shoulders and was a little withered, but it could not conceal her peerlessly beautiful face. The girl's skin was fair and her features were exquisite without any flaws. Although she was slightly inferior to Daoism G in terms of bewitchment, her appearance was already comparable. Furthermore, her eyes were not ordinary black or white. Instead, they were clear and green, resembling clear water that shimmered with a unique beauty. What a beautiful little girl. She seems to have grown up a little. Even Daoism G could not help but exclaim when she saw the girl. Young Master. The girl came to Su Zimo's side and called out with joy in her eyes. This girl was none other than Yen Qi, who possessed half of the god race's bloodline. Su Zimo took her in at the capital of Great Zhou, and she was accepted by Ethereal Peak later on. Su Zimo swept his gaze and nodded slightly. Not bad, you've already entered the conjoint body realm. Although Yen Qi was a remnant of the god race, her talent was frighteningly shocking. Her cultivation speed followed closely behind Su Zimo without being left behind. Although the bloodlines of remnants were impure, their accomplishments might not be inferior to others. Monk Daming and the Blood Fiend from 40,000 years ago were both remnant bloodlines. However, even pure-blooded experts of the primordial races would be suppressed by the two of them at the same cultivation realm. Master, why are you guys here together? Su Zimo asked. Extreme Fire smiled. When I heard that you were killed by the primordial 6 races, I left 100 Refinement Sect and became a free man. I was prepared to look for you in the South region. However, before I reached the South region, I heard that a huge battle broke out at Enigma Palace. As such, I rushed here right away. Thankfully, you're still here. Although Extreme Fire said it indifferently, Su Zimo's heart was moved. When the primordial 6 races set their killing badges on him, everyone wanted nothing more than to avoid him. Even Dapamkara Monastery did not dare to let him into their monastery for fear of being implicated. However, Extreme Fire came to look for him right away. Furthermore, Extreme Fire had already prepared for the worst-case scenario. He was afraid of implicating 100 Refinement Sect, and that was why he left 100 Refinement Sect in advance to regain his freedom. Not long after I arrived here, I encountered this girl. Extreme Fire pointed at Yen Qi and continued. Su Zimo looked at Yen Qi. Yen Qi smiled. I also heard of the news of you being hunted by the primordial 6 races, young master. I wanted to stay by your side and help you. Now that I'm already at the conjoint body realm, Master Crane agreed to let me come over. Master, Yen Qi, you guys, scythe? Su Zimo sighed gently, but a warm feeling flowed through his heart. Up till this point of his cultivation, he roamed Tianhuang mainland and made countless enemies. However, he also made many hot-blooded friends and siblings who could stick together. These people were loyal and did not leave him even though they knew he was in a dangerous place. It was the case for Extreme Fire and Yen Qi. It was the case for Yen Beichen and Demoness Ji. It was the same for Little Fatty and Shijian as well. Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, Zimo, it's difficult for you to survive in Tianhuang mainland now that you're hunted by the primordial 6 races. However, there is a place that might offer a chance of survival. Oh! Out of curiosity, Su Zimo asked where? Extreme Fire replied, the place where I nearly died and obtained Night Spirit as well as the Illumination Sword formation. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly thought of a possibility. Extreme Fire continued, that's the extreme west of Tianhuang mainland, the Kunlun ruins. Indeed. The divine Ho egg was brought out by Extreme Fire from the Kunlun ruins. That was also a speculation that Su Zimo had just thought of. Extreme Fire had once told him that he was exploring a primordial ruin and nearly died. The Kunlun ruins was probably the most famous and largest primordial ruin in Tianhuang mainland. Most importantly, the Kunlun ruins was the battlefield of the primordial war. This was also closely related to Night Spirit. Ever since the battle at Heaven and Earth Valley, Night Spirit had been separated from him and his whereabouts were unknown. However, Su Zimo believed that Night Spirit would not die that easily. If Night Spirit was still alive, could he be in the Kunlun ruins? Extreme Fire said, I've been to the primordial ruin before after all and have a slight understanding of it. If we go together, we might have a higher chance of surviving. Su Zimo nodded thoughtfully. To begin with, the Kunlun ruins was a cultivation ground for him. But now that he thought about the high chance that Night Spirit was in the Kunlun ruins, a sense of anticipation grew in his heart. Right then, Yen Beichen suddenly sat up on the couch. Brother Yen, how are you? Su Zimo hurried forward and asked softly. At that moment, Yen Beichen looked a little better. He looked at Su Zimo fixedly and asked once more, Zimo, will the upper world truly have the power to save Pian Ran? I believe there is. Su Zimo nodded. In truth, The dead could not be resurrected. This involved the great Tao of reincarnation, and even he could not be certain. However, at that moment he could not care less. Right then, the storyteller appeared out of thin air in front of Yen Beichen's couch and said in a deep voice, "There are endless secrets in the world. Tianhuang mainland might just be a well. The only way you can see a wider world is if you jump out of this well. Perhaps you might be able to understand the obscurities of life and death in that world. However, if you commit suicide now, you'll never get the chance ever again." The weight of the storyteller's words was much heavier and more trustworthy than Su Zimo's. True enough. Gradually, some life force recovered from Yen Beichen's eyes and shone brightly. Su Zimo knew that the storyteller's words had finally reignited Yen Beichen's hope. In the past, revenge was the hope that allowed Yen Beichen to continue surviving. Now, saving Qin Pianran would be the hope for Yen Beichen's future. This is the first time I'm seeing the old man persuade others personally. At the side, Lin Xuanji sent a voice transmission secretly to Su Zimo using his spirit consciousness. The storyteller was the current mystic emperor. An emperor was willing to lower his status to persuade Yen Beichen. It was clear how highly the storyteller regarded the latter. The storyteller continued, "Asura, you obtained the inheritance of the fiend emperor hatred. However, I believe that you're not another hatred. Leave your own Dao and break free from the effect of the hatred sutra on you, putting down your obsession. I believe that even though he passed down his legacy, the fiend emperor hatred would not want you to become a second him. You're the Asura, the one and only peerless Asura in this world." Chapter 1477. Entering Kunlun. Chapter 1477. Entering Kunlun. Yen Beichen caressed the hatred fiend's saber beside him and murmured softly, "If I'm not hatred, would you still be willing to follow me?" Clang! Clang! The hatred fiend's saber seemed to be able to understand Yen Beichen's words and buzzed and trembled. It had already decided that Yen Beichen was its master. Be it hatred or the Asura, it would follow Yen Beichen through life and death. "All right." Yen Beichen's eyes shone brightly as he said proudly, "I, the Asura, will bring you to the upper world to take a look in this generation. I will also defy the heavens and change fate, altering life and death." With that said, he bowed deeply to the storyteller. "Thank you, senior." The storyteller nodded slightly with a delighted expression. Indeed, he thought highly of Yen Beichen. In his heart, Yen Beichen's accomplishments might even be higher than Fiend Emperor Hatred's. Yen Beichen turned to Su Zimo and said in a deep voice, "Zimo, I won't be accompanying you on the trip to the Kunlun ruins. You have to be careful." "Don't worry, brother." Su Zimo nodded. Yen Beichen had his own Dao. If he followed Su Zimo to the Kunlun ruins, he might feel restricted instead. Now that Yen Beichen was fine, Su Zimo was completely relieved and no longer had to stay in Enigma Palace. "Zimo, I." The moment Demoness Ji spoke, Su Zimo understood her intentions. He smiled and shook his head. "There's no need for that. You're the pure maiden of this generation. How can you follow me to the Kunlun ruins casually? If Pure Maiden sect finds out about this, I'll probably be hunted down by your experts." Extreme Fire nodded as well. "Don't worry, with me and Nian Qi accompanying Zimo, we can look after one another." "Master, Nian Qi, don't follow me either." Su Zimo said deeply, "The Kunlun ruins is not a good place. There's no need for you guys to accompany me in taking the risk." "What are you talking about?" Extreme Fire's eyes widened as he patted his storage bag. "Don't get ahead of yourself, lad. I've got a treasure map here. I'm heading to the Kunlun ruins for it." "Young master, I'm already here. You can't chase me away." Nian Qi pursed her lips and smiled. Su Zimo did not say anything more. The three of them exchanged glances and smiled. There was no longer a need for words. Since he had already decided to leave, Su Zimo did not delay any longer. He bid farewell to Shi Jian and the others one after another and prepared to move. The storyteller said, "You still have the killing badge of the Bloodvine race on you. If you leave Enigma Palace, the Bloodvine race will definitely see it. I'll tear through space and lead you guys there directly." As he said that, the storyteller swiped his palm across the void before him. As though it was cut by a sharp blade, a gigantic crack appeared in the void. It was dark and deep within. Wind gusted. With a flick of his sleeves, the storyteller swept Su Zimo, Extreme Fire and Yen Qi up and leaped into the crack. "Old man, bring me along. I'll take a look as well." Just as the crack was about to close, Lin Xuanji shouted and tugged at the old storyteller's sleeves, jumping in as well. The world spun. It was a similar sensation as using a major transference talisman. Everything before them was completely dark and even breathing was difficult. In just a few breaths' time, Su Zimo and the rest felt their bodies lighten and their eyes lit up. They were finally seeing light once more. Although they were on the ground, everyone felt a heavy and repressing feeling in their hearts. Everyone looked over instinctively and could not help but freeze on the spot in shock. In front of everyone were mountain ranges that rose and fell continuously. Some of the mountain ranges were sliced into two as though they had suffered a violent collision. Some of the mountain ranges were mostly destroyed. The vast plains of the mountain ranges were strewn with corpses and bones. It was a shocking sight. Some of the corpses were not rotten and retained their original forms. Their bodies were long and more than 10,000 feet long, looking like coiled divine dragons. It was a dragon skeleton. A divine dragon that was more than 10,000 feet long meant that this was a true Ancestor Realm divine dragon. At the edge of the Kunlun ruins, everyone caught sight of the corpse of an Ancestor Realm divine dragon. It was truly hard to imagine how tragic the primordial war was back then. Everyone looked around. There were not only corpses of the dragon race among the bones, there were also corpses of other primordial races as well as countless unknown living beings that filled the entire mountain ranges. This scene was way too shocking. The aura emitted by the ruins was way too repressing and sinister. If one's Dao heart was not steady, they could break down mentally in such an environment. Extreme Fire looked at the scene before him and sighed gently, as though he recalled something. Back then, more than 10 of us came to explore this treasure trove. To think that I was the only one who survived. One of them had his Dao heart broken not long after he entered the Kunlun ruins. After a brief pause, he sighed once more. Actually, I would have died long ago as well if I hadn't met Zimo. Everything that I've experienced over the years is truly tragic in retrospect. The storyteller looked at the ruins and remained silent for a long time before saying slowly, "Zimo, cultivate well in the Kunlun ruins. You don't have to worry about Tianhuang mainland. I'll do my best to deal with the primordial races and buy time for you." Su Zimo nodded. He did not know if he would survive this trip to the Kunlun ruins and his future was uncertain. Even he did not know if he could return alive and when he could return to Tianhuang mainland once more. "Senior, take care as well." Su Zimo bowed deeply to the storyteller. "Brother Su, I'll wait for you to return." Even the cynical Lin Xuanji felt a sense of reluctance at the imminent departure. Su Zimo waved his hand and entered the Kunlun ruins with Extreme Fire and Yen Qi. The three of them walked extremely slowly and surveyed their surroundings with their spirit consciousnesses tensely, afraid that something might happen. The storyteller watched the three of them from outside the Kunlun ruins the entire time and only snapped out of his stupor after their figures vanished. "Old man, why have you suddenly become so emotional?" Lin Xuanji asked with a frown. He knew the storyteller too well. He could sense the pessimism in the storyteller's heart. Given Brother Su's talent, with the Dragon Phoenix True Body and Green Lotus True Body, the primordial races won't be his match if he grows further. Lin Xuanji was optimistic on the other hand. The storyteller shook his head gently. "I'm afraid there's not much time left. If we wait another 10,000 years, I believe that Desolate Marshal will definitely be able to reach the peak and become an existence comparable to the human emperor. However, the conflicts between the primordial races and the cultivation world are increasing and their movements are becoming more frequent. The final battle is about to arrive." Lin Xuanji's heart skipped a beat as he asked, "Old man, how long more do you think that will be based on your divination?" "No more than 100 years at most." The storyteller's voice was heavy. 100 years. Lin Xuanji finally understood why the storyteller was so pessimistic. 100 years was way too short. For cultivators, 100 years was a fleeting duration. It was already not bad if Su Zimo could advance a single minor realm, let alone advance to the Mahayana realm. On the other hand, even if Desolate Marshal was at the Mahayana realm, How could he fight against the experts and emperors of the primordial races? The storyteller murmured softly, "We'll do our best and leave it up to fates." Chapter 1478. Malevolent Spirit Fruit. Chapter 1478. Malevolent Spirit Fruit. Kunlun Ruins. The more Su Zimo and the other two advanced, the more alarmed they became, and the surrounding environment turned increasingly sinister and spooky. The ruins of the great Qian Empire were already filled with a rich malevolent aura after 10,000 years. Coupled with the lingering souls, many malevolent ghosts were born. However, compared to the Kunlun ruins, the great Qian ruins was like a firefly against a bright moon, a drop of water against an ocean. It was a world of a difference. The malevolent aura was so strong that Su Zimo and the other two felt uncomfortable. It was not surprising for any vengeful ghost to be born from such a rich malevolent qi throughout history. The blood qi of Su Zimo and the other two was strong, and their dermic powers rumbled furiously. Most ghosts and fiends knew that they were strong and did not dare to approach them. However, as they ventured deeper into the Kunlun ruins, a phantom would flash before their eyes from time to time. The blood qi in their bodies was also a great tonic for them. Suddenly, the malevolent aura in front of them surged and swiftly formed a black fog that floated towards the three of them. It wanted to devour them completely. Humph! Extreme Fire harumphed coldly. How dare a mere ghost try and come out to harm others in broad daylight? Before his sentence was finished, he conjured a dermic art and tapped forward. A scarlet flame burst forth and entered the swiveling malevolent black fog instantly. The power of thunder and fire was a strong counter to such sinister objects. Furthermore, Extreme Fire's flare was created from the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra, and most conjoint body mighty figures could not withstand it. However, the flare merely caused the black fog to pause for a brief moment without causing any ripples. The black fog continued surging towards the three of them. Hee hee hee. A shuddering laughter sounded from the black fog. There's no daylight in these ruins. It's always dark here. Swoosh. Right after the voice sounded, an incomparably gigantic skull suddenly appeared from the black fog. The holes in its eyes shone with a bloodthirsty glint as it opened its mouth and devoured the three of them. You must have a death wish. The dermic art in Extreme Fire's hands changed once more, and 3 balls of flames appeared, condensing into Samadhi Dao fire that shot over. The power of the Samadhi Dao fire was more than twice that of the previous flames. The moment the Samadhi Dao fire entered the skull's mouth, it burst into flames, and the black fog surrounding the skull was burned into nothingness. Groar! The skull let out an extremely painful roar. However, no matter how it channeled the malevolent qi, it could not extinguish the Samadhi Dao fire on its body. In just a few breaths, the bones of the skulls crackled from the heat and cracks appeared. If you dare to step into the Kunlun ruins, don't even think about getting out alive. The skull said fiercely, the flames here will definitely attract even more vengeful spirits and malevolent ghosts. Just wait to be devoured. Before its words were finished, the skull exploded and scattered onto the ground, turning into ashes. Extreme Fire sighed gently. Back when our group arrived here, more than half of us were killed by these vengeful spirits and malevolent ghosts. In the end, there were only 3 of us left when we entered the treasure ground. After that, the 3 of them were even more careful and continued forward. Before long, Nian Qi's gaze shifted to a black fruit and her eyes lit up. The fruit was the size of an infant's fist and was black on the outside. However, it shone brightly inside like a large and exquisite bunch of grapes. It's a malevolent spirit fruit. Extreme Fire exclaimed softly. When he saw Su Zimo's confusion, Extreme Fire explained, malevolent spirit fruits are extremely rare and can only be born after countless years in a place with rich malevolent aura. For most cultivators, the malevolent spirit fruit is a poisonous fruit and they will definitely die if they consume it. However, once they advance to the Mahayana realm and experience the malevolent earth fire of the 3 calamities of the divine power Tribulation, consuming the malevolent spirit fruit will produce a miraculous effect. The success rate of the Tribulation transcendence will increase by at least 30%. There was definitely no such spirit fruit in Tianhuang mainland. That was because the conditions required to nurture a malevolent spirit fruit were way too stringent that even an environment like the Great Qian ruins could not produce one. It was only possible in the Kunlun ruins. As the storyteller had said, danger and opportunities coexisted in the Kunlun ruins. Su Zimo did not say anything and merely frowned slightly, looking at the bottom of the malevolent spirit fruit in deep thought. Nian Qi had already walked forward, prepared to pluck the malevolent spirit fruit. "Don't move. Watch out." Right then, two voices sounded at almost the same time. The first warning came from Su Zimo. The second was an unfamiliar voice. Right then something weird happened. The ground beneath Nian Qi's feet suddenly cracked and a pair of extremely sharp cold lights flashed, slashing towards her. When Nian Qi heard Su Zimo's warning, she was long prepared as she leaped up and looked down. Bang! Boom! Boom! From the crack on the ground, a gigantic scarlet-backed centipede that was dozens of feet long slithered out and chomped down on Nian Qi, who was in midair. The cultivation of that scarlet-backed centipede was at the perfected conjoint body realm. Even among the 8 demon regions, it was a ferocious beast with terrifying combat strength. Although Nian Qi had just advanced to the conjoint body realm, half of her bloodline came from the god race. With a tender shout, she channeled her bloodline and dermic powers as a blinding sword that shone brightly appeared in her palm. Slash! Gripping her sword with both hands, Nian Qi slashed down fiercely at the scarlet-backed centipede beneath. Clang! Although the gigantic sword stood on the scarlet-backed centipede, it could not slash its way in and sparks flew instead. Scarlet-backed centipedes loved corrosion. This particular one had cultivated countless years in this ruin and by now, its shell was invulnerable against weapons, fire and water. Humph! Nian Qi did not panic and dispersed her sword, channeling her bloodline phenomenon right away. An ancient and majestic pyramid appeared in midair with countless living beings prostrating beneath it. Boom! The pyramid crushed down fiercely towards the scarlet-backed centipede. The scarlet-backed centipede lamented. Although its body was not afraid of sharpness, the pyramid carried an extremely terrifying might and crushed it into two with a ton of weight. Black blood splattered everywhere. The black blood in the scarlet-backed centipede's body contained poison that could kill a conjoint body mighty figure with ease. The scarlet-backed centipede opened its mouth and spat out a black poison mist. Thereafter, it swayed its upper half of its body and wanted to burrow into the ground to escape. Nian Qi possessed the bloodline of the god race and the poisonous blood could not close into her body against the surge of her blood qi. Swoosh! Her figure fell and she charged down instantly. Grabbing one of the scarlet-backed centipede's legs with her bare hands, she yanked it out of the crack in the ground. Among the primordial 9 races, the god race's physique and bloodline were at the peak and were on par with the dragon race. Although the scarlet-backed centipede was massive, it could not compare to Nian Qi in terms of strength. After pulling the scarlet-backed centipede out, Nian Qi smashed it onto the ground violently. The pyramid descended once more and crushed the scarlet-backed centipede into a meat sludge. That counterattack was extremely sharp and displayed Nian Qi's immense capabilities and combat strength. Even Su Zimo nodded to himself when he saw that. Chapter 1479. Dao Attainment of the Skeletons. Chapter 1479. Dao Attainment of the Skeleton. Apart from countless malevolent ghosts, there were also some terrifying living beings in the Kunlun ruins. After killing the scarlet-backed centipede, Nian Qi descended and looked in another direction. On the other side stood a white-robed man at the conjoint body realm. He was handsome and had sparkling eyes. Standing not far away, his clothes fluttered and he looked elegant. At that time, when she wanted to pluck the malevolent spirit fruit, 2 voices reminded her. One of them was Su Zimo and the other was this white-robed man. My gratitude, fellow Daoist. Nian Qi cupped her fists towards that person and expressed her thanks. No problem. The white-robed man smiled gently. Pardon me for being bold. By the looks of it, you guys must have just arrived at the Kunlun ruins, right? Yes. Nian Qi nodded. There was no need to hide this matter. Su Zimo and Extreme Fire did not speak and merely sized up the white-robed man. The white-robed man said, there are dangers lurking everywhere in the ruins. There must be powerful ferocious beasts guarding a treasure like the malevolent spirit fruit. There are also some ferocious beasts that guard the vicinity of certain universal treasures to wait for other living beings to fall into their traps. At that point, the white-robed man's eyes dimmed and his tone turned grim. There were initially 7 of us, but we fell into a trap of a powerful ferocious beast. I was the only one who escaped death, sigh. When he heard that, Extreme Fire reminisced about the past and felt a sense of sympathy for the white-robed man. However, he was still a little cautious as he probed. Are you also here for this malevolent spirit fruit? I'm here for the malevolent spirit fruit. The white-robed man smiled and looked at Nian Qi, saying honestly, however, this malevolent spirit fruit clearly belongs to this fellow Daoist. Extreme Fire nodded slightly. Of course, in the cultivation world, humans were unpredictable. This was their first time meeting, and no one could guarantee the other party's thoughts with just a few words. Fellow Daoists, I've stayed in the Kunlun ruins for a period of time. I wonder if I can travel with you guys. The white-robed man's eyes were filled with anticipation. This. Extreme Fire was hesitant. Normally speaking, the 3 of them were familiar with one another and were resistant towards strangers. However, this was the Kunlun ruins. When Extreme Fire heard about this person's encounter, he could not help but recall his past self. If he allowed this person to wander around the Kunlun ruins alone, the latter would most likely be doomed. Should we bring him along? Extreme Fire sent a voice transmission secretly. Given the 3 of us, we can deal with him easily if he has any evil intentions. Nian Qi did not object and merely looked at Su Zimo. In her heart, Su Zimo would be the one to decide for such matters. Ever since the white-robed man appeared, Su Zimo had not said anything. Suddenly he asked, how should I address you, fellow Daoist? I'm Spirit Scar. The white-robed man smiled gently. Su Zimo nodded. I'm Desolate Marshal. Greetings, fellow Daoist Desolate Marshal. The white-robed man cupped his fists towards Su Zimo. Although their conversation was simple, Extreme Fire and Nian Qi's expressions changed slightly. Both of them could tell that something was amiss. The white-robed man was way too calm when he heard the name Desolate Marshal. Su Zimo's gaze was dark as he asked with a fake smile. Seems like you've never heard of me, fellow Daoist. The white-robed man smiled apologetically. I'm an itinerant cultivator that cultivates in seclusion most of the time. I don't know much about the cultivation world and am inexperienced. I must be quite a joke to you, fellow Daoist. That explanation made sense. However, Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were already wary. Desolate Marshal established his Dao and imparted martial arts to all living beings, shocking the world. Even itinerant cultivators who were in seclusion all year round and were isolated from the world could not have not heard of Desolate Marshal's name. Su Zimo smiled as well and asked, how long more are you going to pretend for? The smile on the white-robed man's face did not fade and his expression turned odd. A sinister aura emanated from him as he rubbed his palms and laughed. Impressive. In all these years, there have been many cultivators who entered the Kunlun ruins, but you're the first to see through my disguise. Both Extreme Fire and Nian Qi felt their scalps tingle. Even though the white-robed man was exposed by Su Zimo, the 2 of them could not make out what he was still. If they had truly allowed this person to travel with them, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Actually, even Su Zimo could not see through this person's true body. However, after the white-robed man appeared, Su Zimo's spirit perception warned him repeatedly, and that was why he tested the waters. Let's see what you are. Su Zimo did not waste his breath on the white-robed man and flicked his finger. Qi. A blinding white sword Qi burst forth and arrived before the white-robed man instantly. The sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword Qi caused the white-robed man's expression to change slightly. Swash! The white-robed man swayed and disappeared before Su Zimo and the other 2, shifting to the other side at an astonishing speed. Even Extreme Fire's gaze could not catch up to him. The white-robed man's figure reappeared with a gash on his cheek that was oozing with blood and a nauseating stench. Although the white-robed man dodged extremely quickly, his cheek was still sliced by the heaven-slaying sword Qi. So, a skeleton attained the Dao and even managed to grow flesh and blood. Sneering coldly, Su Zimo strode forward and closed 2 fingers, waving and slashing towards the white-robed man. TSK! 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 More than 10 heaven-slaying sword chi burst forth and tore in different directions towards the white-robed man. Ah! Sensing danger, the white-robed man suddenly shrieked. The flesh on his body suddenly dissipated, turning into streams of thick malevolent chi that condensed into malevolent spears that charged towards the heaven-slaying sword chi. The white-robed man was left with nothing but a skeleton as he stood on the spot. The skeleton was evidently strange, as though it was pieced together from various bones. There were dragon bones, golden crow bones, and even bones of the god race. The skeleton first used the corpses in the Kunlun ruins to piece together a body of bones. After obtaining the Dao, it used malevolent chi to condense the flesh. If the skeleton were to continue cultivating, it would be no different from a true cultivator. Clang, clang, clang. The malevolent spears released by the skeleton collided with the heaven-slaying sword chi and were not disadvantaged. An ear-piercing sound of collision could be heard. The skeleton already had the cultivation of a half-martial ancestor. Su Zimo's gaze intensified as he strode forward and conjured hand seals with both hands, chanting Sanskrit. Om, ma, ene, pa, mi, hum. The moment the 6 words of daming mantra were released, 6 daming dermic seals descended at the same time. Dermic arts of the Buddhist monasteries were the most lethal for the skeleton. When the Great Vajra Wheel and Great Mount Meru seals descended, the skeleton shuddered and its bones creaked as though they were about to fall apart. Su Zimo sat down and clasped his palms together. He lowered his head like an accomplished monk and recited a series of incantations with a dignified expression. The Great Light Mantra. The Auditory Release Mantra. The Sensory Enigma Mantra. The 6 Paths Diamond Mantra. All of those incantations were used to free the dead and purify their grievances. A ball of Een spirit struggled endlessly from the glabella of the skeleton. However, it gradually could not withstand the consecutive incantations and was eventually extinguished. Swoosh! The skeleton scattered to the ground, returning to dust. Chapter 1480. Kunlun Barrier. Chapter 1480. Kunlun Barrier. Although the skeleton malevolent ghost seemed like he was suppressed by Su Zimo with ease, in reality, his cultivation was top tier even in Tianhuang mainland. Neither extreme fire nor Nian Qi were its match. If Su Zimo did not have the support of the cultivation techniques of the Buddhist monasteries, he would have to spend a lot of effort to suppress the skeleton completely. Let's go. Be careful. Su Zimo said, and the 3 of them continued forward. The 3 of them walked through the Kunlun ruins for an entire day and encountered countless battles along the way. Thankfully, they got out unharmed. The existences in the Kunlun ruins did not care what sort of paragons or monster incarnates they were. They did not know desolate martial at all. In their eyes, Su Zimo and the other 2 were nothing but fresh meat that could be consumed and be of great help to their cultivation. Even with Su Zimo's immense stamina, he was tired after battling for an entire day. Extreme Fire and Nian Qi were even more exhausted and their faces turned pale. Where are we now? Su Zimo had just killed a pure-blooded ferocious beast when he stopped in his tracks and asked. Extreme Fire panted slightly. We're still at the outer perimeter of the Kunlun ruin. The Kunlun ruins was way too huge. The 3 of them had walked for an entire day and were still lingering around the outer perimeter. Look over there. Extreme Fire pointed to the purple gold light in the distance and said in a deep voice, That's the Kunlun barrier. You only truly get to the core of the Kunlun ruins after entering that barrier. However, with the existence of the Kunlun barrier, cultivators outside can't enter at all. Over the years, some cultivators who enter the Kunlun ruins to search for opportunities have merely loitered around the outer perimeter. Su Zimo gazed at the aurora-like light in the distance thoughtfully. Let's go take a look. He said and led the way with Extreme Fire and Nian Qi right behind. Both of them consumed elixirs while recovering their blood qi and stamina. The Kunlun barrier did not seem like it was far. However, Su Zimo and the other 2 walked for another 3 days before they truly arrived at the foot of the Kunlun barrier. Naturally, the journey was another massacre. All 3 of them were the strongest paragons of the conjoint body realm. Given Su Zimo's current cultivation, the living beings and malevolent ghosts at the outer perimeter of the Kunlun ruins were even less of a threat to him. Half-martial ancestor Qing Zhe of Enigma Palace had once said that desolate martial status was already established and no one could threaten him unless a patriarch attacked. He was not exaggerating at all. Su Zimo looked at the Kunlun barrier before him. As long as he passed through this barrier, he would be able to come into contact with the true secrets of the Kunlun ruins and see another world and the legendary Kunlun race. The power of the barrier was extremely mysterious and cold. Extreme Fire led the way and attempted to cross the Kunlun barrier. The moment his body touched the barrier, it met with immense resistance. Although he pushed his bloodline to its limits, he could not cross it. After a moment of stalemate, Extreme Fire could only retreat. I still can't do it. Extreme Fire laughed bitterly. Back then I tried it. To think that I still can't cross it after entering the conjoint body realm. Let me try too. Su Zimo said as he walked towards the Kunlun barrier. The moment he touched the barrier, he felt a tremendous resistance as well. Su Zimo channeled his bloodline slowly, and the sound of a tsunami burst forth from his body. His green lotus true body exuded a divine light and his organs shone brightly. Against the obstruction of the barrier, the green lotus true body turned transparent and transformed into the shape of a creation green lotus. Under the gazes of Extreme Fire and Yen Qi, Su Zimo's figure gradually entered the Kunlun barrier and vanished. He managed to get in? Extreme Fire's eyes were widened in disbelief. Probably. Yen Qi nodded. The two of them waited silently and not long after, Su Zimo's figure appeared once more and he walked back from the Kunlun barrier. How is it? Extreme Fire asked hurriedly. I crossed it. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, this Kunlun barrier is two-way. Not only can it prevent cultivators from entering, it's also impossible for living beings inside to come out. No wonder. Extreme Fire murmured softly, for so many years, there has never been a Kunlun race being in Tianhuang mainland because of this Kunlun barrier. Mahayana patriarchs could naturally pass through this barrier with their power. However, none of them dared to come for fear of triggering a divine power storm that might result in death. As for half-martial ancestor experts and conjoint body mighty figures, none of them could pass through the Kunlun barrier. The Kunlun barrier isolated the Kunlun ruins from Tianhuang mainland completely, forming two different worlds. There was a huge reason why the Kunlun ruins was so mysterious and nobody had been able to unveil it for so many years. Let me try too. After Su Zimo and Extreme Fire tried it, Yen Qi was eager as well and walked forward, heading towards the Kunlun barrier. However, the moment Yen Qi touched the Kunlun barrier, a change happened. A blinding light burst forth from the Kunlun barrier. As though a gigantic rock was tossed into the middle of a lake, massive waves were created on the calm barrier. An extremely terrifying power burst forth from the Kunlun barrier and smashed towards Yen Qi. That power was so terrifying that even Su Zimo's expression changed slightly. Boom! Caught off guard, Yen Qi was struck in the chest by the power of the Kunlun barrier and the bones in her chest shattered instantly. The bloodline of the god race was extremely strong. However, Yen Qi's body was almost torn apart by the impact of the Kunlun barrier. Everything had happened too quickly. Even Su Zimo was unprepared and could not react in time. Yen Qi fell out with a pale expression and spat out a huge mouthful of blood. Her organs were ruptured. Swoosh! As though it was sentient, the Kunlun barrier gathered its strength once more upon realizing that Yen Qi was not dead. A gigantic menacing claw appeared in midair and grabbed towards Yen Qi. Frowning slightly, Su Zimo's figure flashed and he grabbed Yen Qi. Turning into a golden streak of light, he retreated rapidly and fled far from the Kunlun barrier. As the distance between them increased, the menacing claw could not hold on any longer and dissipated gradually. The Kunlun barrier returned to normal once more, as though everything that happened earlier was an illusion. How could this be? Extreme Fire chased over with a bewildered expression. Both Su Zimo and he merely encountered resistance when they tried to cross the Kunlun barrier. However, Yen Qi nearly lost her life. Su Zimo fed Yen Qi an elixir before asking with a frown, who set up this barrier? I'm not sure. Extreme Fire shook his head. Even Enigma Palace might not know the origin of that Kunlun barrier, let alone him. Su Zimo's gaze flickered. Recalling that menacing claw earlier on, he had a vague guess. He was extremely familiar with that claw. That was the claw that Night Spirit would only reveal when he reverted to his true form. If this Kunlun barrier had existed for countless years, it meant that there was a high chance it was set up by the Ho of the primordial era. If that was the case, new doubts would arise. What was the use of that barrier? Why was there such a huge reaction when Nian Qi tried to cross the Kunlun barrier? A killing intent from it was triggered. This could not be a coincidence. It must be some sort of will left behind by the primordial Ho that caused such a change to the Kunlun barrier. Chapter 1481. Secret Ground. Chapter 1481. Secret Ground. What should we do now? Extreme Fire asked. Su Zimo said deeply, this can't continue. We've got to find a safe and quiet place to cultivate for a few days in peace. They roamed the Kunlun ruins and fought the entire time. Although they had accumulated quite a bit of comprehension, there was no end to it. They did not have the opportunity or time to consolidate those comprehensions either. Furthermore, Nian Qi was severely injured right now and could not move much. Even with her god race bloodline and immense regeneration capabilities, it would take at least half a month of recuperation for her injuries to heal. I do know of a place where malevolent ghosts won't barge in. Extreme Fire said in a deep voice, the secret ground I entered 5,000 years ago. I obtained Night Spirit and the Illumination Sword formation from that secret ground. All right, let's head there and recuperate for a period of time. Su Zimo made up his mind. Firstly, Nian Qi could recuperate in peace. Secondly, they had gained quite a bit of comprehension during the past few days of the battle. If they were to seize the opportunity to cultivate and settle down, their cultivation and combat strength would increase significantly. For Su Zimo, he could also make use of this opportunity to refine the large chunk of Ashoka wood in his storage bag. At that time, the three of them would have a breakthrough in their combat strength, and it would be safer for them to explore the Kunlun ruins once more. Extreme Fire took out a map from his storage bag and matched it. That's not far from here. Follow me, he said and led the way. Su Zimo carried Nian Qi on his back and followed closely behind. Every step in the Kunlun ruins was treacherous. The three of them did not move fast, and another half a day passed before they arrived at their destination. Before them was a towering mountain peak. The mountain peak was filled with strange rocks and barren land without any signs of life. Extreme Fire brought the two of them into a cave at the foot of the mountain. There were countless karst holes in the cave, and one could not identify the direction at first glance. Follow me closely. Don't get lost. Extreme Fire reminded and followed the map in his hands closely into a karst hole. There were many fork roads in this cave. Extreme Fire often changed directions and walked towards one of the forked roads. From time to time, it would head left and head right without any pattern. A long time later, Extreme Fire stopped in his tracks. Su Zimo looked over. Before them was another extremely long tunnel with no end in sight. Within it, there were many corpses strewn all over the ground with weapons scattered all over. Su Zimo swept his gaze. Through the dermic weapons on the ground, he could deduce that most of the corpses belonged to the Dharma characteristic realm, and some of them were conjoint body mighty figures or even half-martial ancestor experts. The experts had died for a long time and their bodies were covered in dust. Even for the conjoint body mighty figures and half-martial ancestor experts with their indestructible bodies, they were left with nothing but empty bones and clothes. Some of the corpses were humanoid, some were ferocious beasts and demons. There were all sorts. However, every single corpse had a purple gold ribbon tied around them. Kunlun race. Su Zimo murmured softly. He had a vague guess, but he did not dare to confirm it. The passage and the extremely complicated karst hole outside were clearly man-made. If one did not know the way, they would not be able to enter or leave. He wondered who the owner of this secret ground was. What was the motive for it? He did not know what happened back then to cause so many people to die here. Master, this is where you got poisoned back then? Su Zimo asked. After he entered, he had already released his spirit consciousness and scanned his surroundings. However, he could not discover any other living beings or dangers. Extreme Fire nodded and looked at the storage bag beside one of the corpses, sighing. Back when I came here and saw so many treasures on the ground, I was naturally tempted. One could imagine how Extreme Fire, who was still a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord back then, was naturally emotional when he saw so many dharmic weapons and storage bags left behind by mighty figures. He pointed at the corpse. When I saw that there was no danger around, I went forward and wanted to open this storage bag to take a look. To think that the moment this storage bag opened, a goo worm ran out and bit me. That single attack nearly buried me here. Su Zimo's gaze shifted, and not far away, he discovered the corpse of a goo worm. Without the need for Extreme Fire to take revenge, the goo worm had already died a long time ago without its master's care. Extreme Fire reminisced with a sense of trepidation. At that time, I felt my head spin and crushed the transference talisman in my hands without hesitation. At the same time, I waved my sleeves and collected the items that fell out of the storage bag. Thereafter, I fell into the spatial tunnel and was teleported to the Tsonglang mountain range of the North region. Later on, Extreme Fire used his remnant consciousness to open up a cave abode there and fought against the poison for 5,000 years before meeting Su Zimo and surviving. In hindsight, everything could only be described as a freak coincidence. Extreme Fire still felt emotional when he recalled the past. In that case, Night Spirit, the Illumination Stone and Illumination Sword formation fell from that storage bag? Su Zimo asked. No. Extreme Fire shook his head. When I opened that storage bag, there were indeed many items that fell out. There was the Illumination Stone and the Illumination Sword formation, but Night Spirit's egg wasn't there. At the mention of that, Extreme Fire seemed to be immersed in his memories and frowned. At that time, my vision was already a little blurry. I felt as though Night Spirit's egg had rolled over from the tunnel and leaped into the dimensional tear formed by the transference talisman to teleport out with me. Su Zimo's heart stirred. If Extreme Fire was not wrong, it would mean that he was not the one who brought Night Spirit out. Instead, Night Spirit was sentient and chose Extreme Fire to leave the Kunlun ruins with the latter's help. That was not impossible. Back in the depths of Baiming Town, the Kuan Pang egg hatched in the primordial divine spring possessed intelligence not weaker than an adult and had many complicated emotions. That Kuan Pang egg could even sense how terrifying the martial Dao prime body was. Back then, Night Spirit was only an egg. Why was it in this secret ground? Why would Night Spirit choose Extreme Fire and leave the Kunlun ruins? Su Zimo had a feeling that if he were to explore the secret ground once more, there was a high chance he would obtain the answer he wanted. Right then, Nian Qi let out a drowsy sound on Su Zimo's back. There's no need to hurry and explore this secret ground. Su Zimo said deeply, we'll cultivate here first and it won't be too late to explore the secret ground after we break through. All right. Extreme Fire nodded in agreement as well. On both sides of the passage were many secret chambers. Su Zimo and the other two arrived at the closest secret chamber and entered to cultivate in seclusion. Chapter 1482. Rakshasa Yu. Chapter 1482. Rakshasa Yu. 1. Time was non-existent in the mountains and cultivation was endless. It had been 20 years since Su Zimo entered the Kunlun ruins. In the past 20 years, there had been many changes in Tianhuang mainland as well. Apart from the dragon, Kuan and barbarian races, the movements of the primordial six races became increasingly frequent as more of them appeared on Tianhuang mainland to expand their territories. For the past 20 years, countless small sects and factions had been annexed by the primordial six races. There were even more cultivators that died. Right now, the primordial six races were still restraining themselves and had not clashed head-on with the super sections. Although there were occasional conflicts, things were left unsettled. For the past 20 years, the primordial six races had not relaxed at all in their search for Su Zimo. However, no matter how they searched, they could not find Su Zimo. It was as though Su Zimo had vanished from Tianhuang mainland. Chaos Essence Sect. Di Fan sat in the cave abode with a row of disciples under his charge. They had just returned from the 4 regions, 3 oceans and 1 continent of Tianhuang mainland and were travel-worn. There's still no news of Desolate Marshal? Fan asked with a frown. No. One of the disciples said in a deep voice, ever since Desolate Marshal appeared outside Enigma Palace, he seemed to have vanished without a trace. In fact, I suspect that Desolate Marshal might have already died. Humph. Fan harumphed coldly and glared at the disciple, scaring the latter so much that he shrank his neck and shuddered. Who is Desolate Marshal? Fan said coldly, if he was someone who would die so easily, how could he have escaped twice from my hands? The other disciples reported news one after another as well, but none of them could spot any traces of Desolate Marshal. Master, a cultivator said in a deep voice, pardon me for being blunt. From the information obtained from the battle at Enigma Palace, Desolate Marshal's Green Lotus true body has transformed completely. His combat strength is even comparable to a half-martial ancestor. If there's truly news of him, you can't be overly careless. Foo-foo. Fan sneered. What do you know? Initially, I wanted to make a move myself. But now that the primordial 6 races have set down their killing badges, there's no longer a need for me to do it personally. All I have to do is obtain news of Desolate Marshal as soon as possible. Once I spread them, experts of the primordial 6 races will naturally kill him. With a blade as sharp as the primordial 6 races, wouldn't it be a waste not to make use of it? A disciple pondered for a moment and his eyes darted around. Suddenly he said, Master, I have a plan that isn't gentlemanly. However, if this plan works, Desolate Marshal will definitely appear. Oh. Fan raised his brow slightly and asked, tell me about it. The disciple smiled gently. I heard that Desolate Marshal is extremely loyal and sentimental. He came from the North region's Ethereal Peak. If we head to Ethereal Peak, suppress their cultivators and spread the news, Desolate Marshal will definitely show up once he hears about it. Fan's eyes lit up as he murmured thoughtfully, we can give this method a try. North region. North region. I can invite fellow Daoist Chen Yu of Glass Palace as well as fellow Daoist Di Ju of Sword Sect to take a look around Ethereal Peak. At that thought, Fan took out a few spirit cranes from his storage bag and wrote a message, scattering the messenger cranes to the super sects such as Glass Palace and Sword Sect. North region. This day, 2 people arrived in the vicinity of Tsonglang mountain range. The man and woman were both at the conjoint body realm. The man was tall and wore a huge hood that concealed his face completely. The woman looked no different from a human. She had a slim, curvaceous figure and her legs were exposed, slender and long. Her skin was as fair as snow and her face was extremely beautiful. Anyone who saw that face and figure would be stunned. Hey Tua, why did you mysteriously bring me here? The woman frowned slightly and asked. Her voice was extremely pleasant as well. The man named Hey Tua chuckled and said, Young mistress, you don't know. The place I brought you here today has something to do with Desolate Marshal. Hey Tuo's voice was hoarse and unpleasant. Oh. The woman raised her brow slightly with an interested expression. If anyone from the primordial 6 races were here, they would be able to recognize the 2 of them. Both of them were from the Rakshasa race. The man's name was Rakshasa Hey Tua. That woman was the most famous monster incarnate of the Rakshasa race in this generation, Rakshasa Yu. The Rakshasa race was extremely mysterious. The men were extremely ugly with green faces and bared fangs, resembling malevolent ghosts. However, the women were extremely beautiful. They were not inferior to the fairies of the 9 heavens. Rakshasa Yu was not only peerless among her peers in the Rakshasa race, her appearance was also unparalleled. Young mistress, look over there. Rakshasa Hey Tua pointed to a place not far away where the peach blossom trees were the most lush. There's a town there called Pingyang Town. I see it. Rakshasa Yu nodded and sensed with her eyes closed. There's nothing special about this town. It's just a group of humans with slightly longer lifespans. Oh, there's also a peach blossom tree that gained sentience and became a demon. However, that's nothing much as well. In the blink of an eye, Rakshasa Yu scanned Pingyang Town from head to toe. Young mistress, you don't understand. Rakshasa Hey Tua said smugly. I've already investigated. Pingyang Town was the place of Desolate Marshal's rise. I heard that this was the town where he obtained the Dao and appeared out of thin air. So, Rakshasa Yu was indifferent. Desolate Marshall's old friends of the past have already passed away. What has Pingyang Town got to do with him? Young mistress, I heard that Desolate Marshall is extremely sentimental and has returned to Pingyang Town countless times. Rakshasa Yu said, this town is preserved so well despite the chaotic era right now. Desolate Marshall must have played a huge role in that fact. Since we can't find Desolate Marshall, why don't we eat everyone in this town? We can vent our hatred as well. Rakshasa Yu's tone turned excited at the mention of eating people. Beneath the dark hood, a grisly red tongue stuck out and licked its lips. Rakshasa Yu frowned slightly in resistance. They're just mortals, what's there to eat? Young mistress, why have you become so benevolent? Rakshasa Yu asked. Humph. If I really want to eat, I'll eat some experts of the human race. What's the use of eating these mortals? Rakshasa Yu sneered. So what? Rakshasa Yu pouted. Since we're already here, we can't return empty-handed. We've got to fill our stomachs no matter what. Young mistress, don't worry. I'll definitely leave that conjoint body peach blossom tree demon for you. Just as the two of them were chatting in Songlang Mountain Range, two divine lights lit up in a dark room in the Su family's residence in Pingyang Town. A purple-robed cultivator floated down from the couch with a burning gaze. Smiling gently, he murmured, to think that you would harbor designs on Pingyang Town. 1. Chapter 1483. Who were you calling an ant? Chapter 1483. Who were you calling an ant? Su residence. The door to the room opened. A tender and naive boy walked in. When he saw the martial Dao prime body, he pouted his lips slightly. Young master, two people have arrived over there. The aura they exude is extremely annoying. Tao Yao had gained sentience through Dai Yu and his cultivation speed was extremely fast. Right now, he was already at the conjoint body realm. The cultivation of the martial Dao prime body was at the perfected Dharma characteristic realm. 1. That cultivation speed was already rather terrifying. 20 years ago, when he headed to the South region, he had only just entered the Dharma characteristic realm. Young master, continue cultivating. I'll chase those two away. Tao Yao raised his fist. Come back. The martial Dao prime body shook his head gently. You're not their match. Ah. Tao Yao was slightly stunned. Actually, Tao Yao was extremely strong. Back when he was at the Dharma characteristic realm, he could even suppress Monkey, the spirit tiger and the others. However, Tao Yao had a pure heart. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had never killed or injured any living being. He did not wish to kill either. That was Tao Yao's conviction. He did not like the fighting and killing of the cultivation world. What he yearned for the most was the peaceful life in Pingyang Town. However, the two people who came today were definitely not kind souls. The Rakshasa race was the most violent and bloodthirsty. If it was just a spar, Tao Yao might be able to defeat the two of them. However, if it was a life-and-death battle, Tao Yao would definitely die. Young master, what should we do then? Tao Yao turned nervous. No worries. The martial Dao prime body smiled gently. I'll take care of it. Help me brew a pot of tea. All right. Tao Yao agreed crisply and turned to prepare tea. The martial Dao prime body arrived in the courtyard and sat on a stone stool, waiting for the intruders to arrive. Pingyang Town. Rakshasa Yu and Rakshasa Yu were extremely fast and arrived above Pingyang Town before long. The two of them stood in the air and attracted countless gazes the moment they appeared. Pingyang Town seemed to have gone silent instantly. However, in the blink of an eye, the pedestrians on the streets continued forward. The crowd was bustling with activity. The mortals that saw them merely looked surprised but did not have much of a reaction. The clamor and bustle of Pingyang Town returned before long. Rakshasa Yu's expression darkened. That feeling made him extremely displeased. As a Rakshasa of the primordial races, even human cultivators were nothing but food for him. In their expedition this time round, they encountered many cultivators. All the cultivators were scared out of their wits by the two of them. However, the mortals before them dared to ignore them. Rakshasa Yu felt as though he had been severely humiliated. Humph! With a cold sneer, he suddenly removed his hood, revealing an extremely ugly and menacing face. He had a green face with bared fangs and his nose faced the skies like a malevolent ghost from hell. There were sharp nails on his fingers and toes. That was not all. Shing! Rakshasa Yu broke free of his black robes and revealed his complete form. A pair of pitch-black meat wings grew from his back with sharp spikes that shone coldly. He flapped his massive meat wings and emanated a sinister and bloody killing intent. As he surveyed the many mortals of Pingyong town, he stuck out his grisly red tongue and smacked his lips. Ah! True enough. A commotion broke out in the crowd. Many women exclaimed in shock when they saw such a monster. Some of them even fled home and closed their doors. Some of the children were even bawling in fear. In a courtyard, a child around 5 or 6 years old threw himself into the arms of an old man who was sitting on a bench and basking in the sun, not daring to look up. When Rakshasa Yu saw that, he felt slightly better and his eyes shone with excitement. His favorite thing was to see those ants panic, fear and shout in front of him. Child, don't be afraid. The old man was extremely calm and smiled as he patted the child on the back, comforting the latter. These are just some reckless little monsters. It's nothing much. What? Rakshasa Yu was stunned for a moment. Up till this point of his cultivation, this was the first time he had heard someone describe the Rakshasa race as little monsters. Furthermore, to his surprise, even after he revealed his true form, Pingyong town was not in a complete mess. After a slight commotion, everything gradually returned to normal. Nobody cared about him at all. Actually, Pingyong town had experienced countless storms over the years. However, it was always safe and sound under the protection of Tao Yao and the martial Dao Prime Body. It was especially so for the older generation of Pingyong town. They were no longer surprised by such things. In their hearts, these fiend demons could not cause any trouble in Pingyong town with second young Master Su around. Ants like you don't know what's good for you. Rakshasa Yu glared at the old man in the courtyard with widened eyes and opened his mouth, wanting to devour both of them. Suddenly, at the side, Rakshasa Yu frowned and said, "Something's not right." "What's wrong?" Rakshasa Yu asked instinctively. Rakshasa Yu pointed to an unassuming courtyard in Pingyong town and said sternly, "There's a person in there. It's a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord." Rakshasa Yu swept his gaze across. In the courtyard, a purple-robed cultivator sat facing them and sipped tea leisurely with an indifferent expression. Behind the purple-robed cultivator stood a pink and tender boy who looked very obedient. It was the peach blossom tree demon they had discovered. That person looks familiar. Rakshasa Yu looked at the side profile of the purple-robed cultivator, but could not remember where she saw him from. He's only at the Dharma characteristic realm. What's wrong? Rakshasa Yu frowned. Young mistress, aren't you making a fuss out of nothing? Rakshasa Yu continued frowning. However, when my spirit consciousness searched Pingyong town earlier on, I did not discover that person's existence. In other words, that person can hide from my spirit consciousness detection. Ha ha! Rakshasa Yu roared in laughter. Young mistress, you're thinking too much. It's just a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord. Even if Desolate Marshal is here, so what? Young mistress, watch me attack and suppress that ant. In a flash, Rakshasa Yu arrived in the skies above the residence right away. Rakshasa Yu was puzzled and followed closely behind. Right then the purple-robed cultivator in the courtyard turned around and looked at Rakshasa Yu in midair, asking indifferently, "Who were you calling an ant?" "You." Rakshasa Yu's pupils constricted when she caught sight of the purple-robed cultivator's face. That person's face was identical to the drawing of the person she had seen in the Rakshasa race. However, the person in the drawing had green robes and black hair. As for this person, he wore purple robes and exuded an indescribable might and weight. Even she felt shudders. Desolate Marshal! Rakshasa Yu exclaimed with disbelief in her beautiful eyes. Chapter 1484. 100 feet. Chapter 1484. 100 feet. When Rakshasa Yu heard the words Desolate Marshal, he was stunned for a moment as well before reacting. He's definitely not Desolate Marshal. Rakshasa Yu sneered. Everyone knows that Desolate Marshal has already entered the conjoint body realm. I reckon that this is merely a clone of Desolate Marshal. Rakshasa Yu nodded as well. That was the most logical explanation. Typically, if cultivators cultivated cloning techniques, their cultivation realms would be lower than their prime bodies and their combat strength would be greatly reduced. Initially, I merely wanted to explore Pingyang town and eat some small fries. To think that I would catch a big fish here. Rakshasa Yu grinned. Desolate Marshal, you're merely a Dharma characteristic clone. How dare you go against me? Even if your prime body comes, I'll rip him apart. Rakshasa Yu said indifferently. I've long heard that Desolate Marshal has a dragon phoenix clone. To think that you have a third clone. Since your prime body is hiding, I'll destroy your clone today. Initially, Rakshasa Yu was not interested in Pingyang town. However, since Desolate Marshal's clone was discovered, their trip was not wasted. The Marshal Dao prime body had an indifferent expression. Indeed, I cultivate a cloning technique. However, you guys are wrong about one thing. Oh! Rakshasa Yu raised her brow. The Marshal Dao prime body said slowly, to be precise, the Dragon Phoenix body and Green Lotus body are both my clones. What you're seeing now is my prime body. Rakshasa Yu and Rakshasa Yu were slightly stunned. Ha 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 ha. Immediately, Rakshasa Yu burst into laughter. Desolate Marshal. Oh Desolate Marshal. Do you think I'll believe such nonsense? A Dharma characteristic prime body? I can crush you with a single finger. Is that so? The Marshal Dao prime body drank the hot tea in his cup and stood up slowly. An extremely terrifying aura burst forth from the Marshal Dao prime body. Although it was just a simple motion of rising, it affected the world. Instantly, the void trembled. Suddenly, a phantom appeared behind the Marshal Dao prime body and soared into the skies. A heaven and earth Dharma characteristic. Back in the North Sea, even when the Marshal Dao prime body fought against 3 conjoint body grand demons, he did not use his heaven and earth Dharma characteristic. That was because there was no need for that. However, it was different now. Although the two of them were both at the conjoint body realm, they were from the Rakshasa race, one of the primordial races. One of them was even the young mistress of the Rakshasa race. Her combat strength was so terrifying that she could kill human half-martial ancestors with ease. Foo-foo. Rakshasa Yu sneered. How dare you take out a technique like a heaven and earth Dharma characteristic? Even a supreme Dharma characteristic won't be able to defend against a single punch from me. Rakshasa Yu did not laugh. She felt a shuddering aura from the Dharma characteristic that was rising rapidly. How was that possible? How could a mere heaven and earth Dharma characteristic threaten her? 90 feet. In the blink of an eye, the heaven and earth Dharma characteristic of the Marshal Dao prime body had already climbed to a height of 90 feet. However, the heaven and earth Dharma characteristic was still growing rapidly without any signs of stopping. Could Desolate Marshal's Dharma characteristic have also been cultivated to a height of 99 feet? Rakshasa Yu frowned slightly. Back in the Battle of Heaven and Earth Valley, the Green Lotus True Body had once used a 99 feet tall Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic to kill a conjoint body mighty figure of the primordial races. Of course, Rakshasa Yu was fearless. Although the 99 feet tall Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic was troublesome to deal with, it was not a threat to her. 91 feet. 95 feet. 99 feet. An incomparably tall phantom soared into the skies with a terrifying aura. Standing upright, it had a burning gaze like a divine being. Immediately after, right in front of Rakshasa Yu and Rakshasa Yu, the 99 feet tall Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic rose by another foot. Boom! Boom! Heaven and earth rumbled. An incomparably thick pressure descended. This power surpassed common sense and limits. Even this world could not accommodate this Dharma characteristic. Thin tears appeared in the void around the Heaven and Earth Dharma characteristic. 100 feet. 100 feet Dharma characteristic. In the cultivation world, 9 was an extreme number. Even the Green Lotus true body only reached a height of 99 feet after fusing the 3 supreme Dharma characteristics and did not break through that barrier. However, the prime body cultivated 100 sutras with the martial Tao furnace and smelted all dharmic arts, forming an unprecedented 100 feet tall Dharma characteristic. If there was truly the saying of Peerless, that heaven and earth Dharma characteristic could be considered as Peerless Dharma characteristic. None of the heaven and earth Dharma characteristics could ride above it. Even Monk Daming's 4 supreme dharmic bodies could not defend against the might of this Peerless Dharma characteristic. The existence of the martial Tao prime body was a variable. Nobody could divine his future. Rakshasa Yu's expression turned pale instantly. Although the difference between 99 feet and 100 feet was only a foot tall, the difference was like heaven and earth. The Peerless Dharma characteristic of the martial Tao prime body lowered its head slightly and looked down at Rakshasa Yu and Rakshasa Yu. Its gaze shone like 2 blazing suns that could not be ignored. For the first time, Rakshasa Yu felt insignificant in the face of this Peerless Dharma characteristic. It felt as though he was being glared at by a true god, as though he could be suppressed to death at any moment. Rakshasa race? In my eyes, you're ants as well. The martial Tao prime body said slowly with a voice like a gigantic bell and unparalleled might. So what if it's 100 feet? It's just a Dharma characteristic after all. Rakshasa Yu channeled his bloodline wildly and roared into the skies. 2 cold shimmering curved sabers appeared between his hands as he flapped his wings, wanting to make use of his movement technique to maneuver around the Peerless Dharma characteristic that was 100 feet tall. You overestimate yourself. The martial Tao prime body sneered and his spirit consciousness moved. The Peerless Dharma characteristic behind him suddenly extended its palm and suppressed Rakshasa Yu. That gigantic palm covered the skies. A terrifying might and berserk power rained down. Even Rakshasa Yu's speed became extremely slow under the envelopment of that power. Rakshasa Yu's movement technique was completely useless against the suppression of the Peerless Dharma characteristic. He could only choose to fight against the Peerless Dharma characteristic head-on. Ah! Rakshasa Yu roared and channeled his bloodline dharmic powers. He raised the 2 sabers in his hands and slashed towards the palm of the Peerless Dharma characteristic. Clang! The 2 sabers of Rakshasa Yu struck the palm of the Peerless Dharma characteristic and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. They could not slash their way in. Pest! Rakshasa Yu's expression changed. The dharmic powers of 100 feet tall heaven and earth Dharma characteristic were already condensed to this point and were indestructible. Even mighty figured dharmic weapons could not hurt it. A tremendous power surged into Rakshasa Yu's body through the curved saber. Poof, poof, poof. Rakshasa Yu's arms exploded into a blood mist. Immediately after, his upper body, chest, legs and head exploded into a blood mist under the suppression of that terrifying power. Boom! Boom! The palm of the Peerless Dharma characteristic crushed down and pushed Rakshasa Yu onto the ground, turning him into a meat sludge. His essence spirit did not even have a chance to escape and died on the spot. The martial Tao prime body attacked. All it took was a single punch to suppress a conjoint body mighty figure of the Rakshasa race completely. 1. Chapter 1485. Submit or Die. Chapter 1485. Submit or Die. Rakshasa Yu had died too quickly. Rakshasa Yu was stunned by the 100 feet Peerless Dharma characteristic of the martial Tao prime body. Before she could react, Rakshasa Yu was already dead. The martial Tao prime body had a cold expression as his gaze shifted to Rakshasa Yu. The Peerless Dharma characteristic behind him did the same thing. 2 divine lights shone down and Rakshasa Yu felt a tremendous pressure as though she no longer had any secrets. Submit or die. The martial Tao prime body said slowly. The Peerless Dharma characteristic spoke at the same time. The voice was deafening and reverberated through the world. Even when Rakshasa Yu and Rakshasa Yu descended, the martial Tao prime body had already activated the array formation around the place and isolated it. Otherwise, The mere aftershock of their exchange would have been enough to raze Pingyang Town to the ground. Bow down. As though she had heard the greatest joke in the world, Rakshasa Yu laughed out of anger. So what if you're 100 feet tall Dharma characteristic? Is a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord worthy of me making me submit? Rakshasa Yu's figure flashed as she wielded her curved saber and charged towards the martial Dao prime body. The men of the Rakshasa race had green faces and bared fangs. There were even wings on their backs that were terrifying. However, the women of the Rakshasa race were unusually beautiful. They did not have any meat wings or sharp nails and merely looked taller than ordinary humans. Although she did not have meat wings, Rakshasa Yu's movement technique was even faster than Rakshasa Hei Tu'a. The speed of the Rakshasa race was the fastest among the primordial 9 races. Even the Golden Crow race was slightly inferior. However, the peerless Dharma characteristic of the martial Dao prime body distorted the void everywhere its gaze could reach. Any single step it took caused the ground to quake. Even a single breath of air from this peerless Dharma characteristic would create a dermic power cyclone and condense a terrifying dermic art. Every single move was a dermic art. Instantly, the dermic powers in that part of the world surged. No matter how fast Rakshasa Yu was, she had to have enough space to dodge. However, this world was filled with endless dermic arts and every single one of them was shockingly powerful. She could not dodge at all. Impossible! Rakshasa Yu had a bewildered expression and her beautiful eyes shone with panic. A person's time and energy are limited. How can he cultivate so many dermic arts? 1. Boom! The peerless Dharma characteristic punched over and a gigantic air current surged. That punch seemed like it could break a hole in the firmaments. Rakshasa Yu had nowhere to run. Desolate Marshal, you've gone too far. Suddenly, Rakshasa Yu shrieked and channeled her bloodline. She conjured hand seals with both hands and struck the gigantic fist. At the same time, her eyes lit up as she swung the curved saber in her hands and hollered softly, "Apocalyptic Rakshasa Slash." A saber shadow flashed and slashed towards the fist of the peerless Dharma characteristic. The eyes of the martial Dao prime body focused. To everyone else, that was merely a slash from Rakshasa Yu. However, he could see that Rakshasa Yu had slashed hundreds of times in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of slashes were released at an extremely fast speed without any delays. All of them stacked together and formed a saber shadow. The burst of the secret skill increased the might of the slash by folds. That slash was indeed qualified to be called apocalyptic. Boom! Many dermic arts collided against the fist of the martial Dao prime body's peerless Dharma characteristic like rocks sinking into the ocean without causing any ripples. Thereafter, the saber shadow descended and slashed the fist of the peerless Dharma characteristic. Boom! There was a deafening bang. Peerless sharpness splattered everywhere and the void trembled. The apocalyptic Rakshasa slash was shattered by a single punch from the peerless Dharma characteristic. Cracks appeared on the fist of the peerless Dharma characteristic. That slash had still injured the peerless Dharma characteristic in the end. As the young mistress of the Rakshasa race and someone whose cultivation realm was a major cultivation realm above the martial Dao prime body, Rakshasa Yu was definitely not someone easy to deal with. Break! Unable to shatter the peerless Dharma characteristic with a secret skill, Rakshasa Yu channeled her bloodline once more and the sound of tsunami echoed from her body. Thereafter, a phenomenon rose behind her. It was no wonder why Rakshasa Yu was this generation's monster incarnate of the Rakshasa race. She had already cultivated a bloodline phenomenon. 5 Rakshasa women appeared around Rakshasa Yu. They were beautiful and flawless, wearing veils with charming figures. However, they had cold expressions and glared at the martial Dao prime body without any emotions. Kill! Rakshasa Yu hollered. The 5 Rakshasa women beside her attacked at the same time and released their apocalyptic Rakshasa slash. 5 saber shadows descended. This time round, even the peerless Dharma characteristic of the martial Dao prime body could not dodge and was struck heavily by the 5 apocalyptic Rakshasa slashes. Crack, crack, crack. The body of the peerless Dharma characteristic gradually cracked. No matter how strong the peerless Dharma characteristic was, there was a limit. Under the continuous attacks of Rakshasa Yu, the peerless Dharma characteristic finally could not hold out. In the blink of an eye, it dissipated. Hee hee. Rakshasa Yu stood in the circle of 5 Rakshasas and sneered like a moon illuminated by a group of stars. Desolate Marshal, your 100 feet Dharma characteristic is shattered. Let's see what you have to make me submit. Bloodline phenomenon. The Martial Dao Prime Body said indifferently, I have 1 tube. Before his sentence was finished, the figure of the Martial Dao Prime Body suddenly vanished. Rakshasa Yu's heart skipped a beat and she tensed up instantly. She released her spirit consciousness and scanned her surroundings continuously, but she could not find any trace of the Martial Dao Prime Body. Desolate Marshal, where are you? Rakshasa Yu was a little nervous and channeled her bloodline phenomenon. The 5 Rakshasa women protected her tightly. Suddenly, she felt the temperature of the entire world climb and purple flames burned furiously in the void. The bloodline phenomenon of the Martial Dao Prime Body was a gigantic furnace. It was the Martial Dao furnace that could nurture 100 sutras and smelt all dharmic arts as well as heaven and earth. The reason why Rakshasa Yu could not see the Martial Dao Prime Body was because she was already in the gigantic furnace. This was a fight between bloodline phenomenons. Swoosh! A Rakshasa woman beside Rakshasa Yu blazed with flames and soared into the skies. In the blink of an eye, the Rakshasa woman condensed from the bloodline phenomenon was reduced to ashes. Rakshasa Yu's expression turned paler. She had already realized that she had fallen into the other party's bloodline phenomenon. Submit or die. The voice of the Martial Dao Prime Body sounded with endless might and dominance. There was no third option for Rakshasa Yu. She either had to submit or die. As the young mistress of the Rakshasa race, how can I submit to you? Rakshasa Yu sneered, Desolate Marshal, dream on. Swoosh! As the purple flames surged, another Rakshasa woman turned into nothingness and vanished. Swoosh! 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 In just a few breaths, the Rakshasa women beside Rakshasa Yu were all refined by the Martial Dao furnace. This meant that Rakshasa Yu's bloodline phenomenon was burned to ashes by the Martial Dao furnace. Submit or die. The voice of the Martial Dao Prime Body sounded once more. However, this time round, apart from endless might, there was a hint of determination, coldness and killing intent in his voice. Chapter 1486, Protecting Ethereals. Chapter 1486, Protecting Ethereal. Rakshasa Yu had already realized that Desolate Marshal would truly refine her to ashes if she did not submit. Desolate Marshal did not care about women at all. For some reason, Rakshasa Yu suddenly felt aggrieved. Up till this point of her cultivation, her talent was terrifying and her beauty was unparalleled across the races. There were countless paragons and monster incarnates pursuing her. When had she ever suffered such grievances? She had never been bullied like this before. She was the young mistress of the Rakshasa race and was unusually prideful. In her opinion, there was no one in this world who could make her submit. In fact, there was no one in the entire Rakshasa race that was worthy of her, let alone make her submit. However, the dominance of the Martial Dao Prime Body caused Rakshasa Yu's conviction to collapse. Up till this point of her cultivation, she had never encountered someone so unreasonable and domineering. Instantly, she was flustered and had no idea what to do. Am I going to die in the hands of a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord today? This Desolate Marshal is truly detestable. Extremely detestable. Isn't there a third choice? In that moment of life and death, Rakshasa Yu's thoughts were completely messed up. Nobody wanted to die. At this point of her cultivation, if nothing went wrong, there was a high chance she would advance to the Mahayana realm and become a patriarch. She did not want to die here at all. However, Rakshasa Yu was indignant. Was she really going to have to submit to Desolate Marshal? Rakshasa Yu's conviction had already begun to waver and she fell into immense pain with a conflicted expression. However, the purple flames in the Martial Dao furnace did not have any intention of stopping and began to burn on her body. Desolate Marshal, you're truly way too detestable. Rakshasa Yu shrieked. Desolate Marshal was not even willing to give her any time to consider. Rakshasa Yu's eyes reddened and tears welled up in them. However, she was unyielding and refused to let them fall. Finally, She grit her teeth and said hatefully, I can submit, but I'll never betray the Rakshasa race or harm my clansmen. She was the young mistress of the Rakshasa race and the bloodline of the Rakshasa flowed within her. That was her bottom line. Suddenly, Rakshasa Yu felt her body lighten, and the sense of danger that her life was hanging on a thread had vanished. The purple flames that surrounded her initially had vanished as well. It was as though she had returned to that familiar world. The surroundings were no longer suffocating or scorching. The air was fresh. Not far away, the martial Dao prime body sat casually at a stone table and sipped tea leisurely with an indifferent expression. The tender and obedient child stood guard behind him quietly. Everything looked peaceful. Rakshasa Yu felt the joy of escaping a calamity. Even that extremely detestable person looked much more pleasing to the eye. However, she quickly realized her situation. Right now, she had already submitted to Desolate Marshal. Theoretically speaking, the Dharma characteristic Dao Lord before her was her master. However, she could not bring herself to call him master. With a cold expression, Rakshasa Yu said in a deep voice, Desolate Marshal, I'll submit to you, but I won't call you master. As you wish. The martial Dao prime body said indifferently without being angered or forcing anything. Rakshasa Yu frowned slightly. This was not the reaction she had expected. After a moment of silence she continued, Also, I'll definitely not do something like serving tea or pouring water. As you wish. That was still the martial Dao prime body's reply. Rakshasa Yu was stunned for a moment. Why did Desolate Marshal suddenly become so easygoing? Immediately, she seemed to have thought of something and could not help but change her expression slightly. Clenching her fists tightly, she grit her teeth. Desolate Marshal, don't even think of touching me. As the young mistress of the Rakshasa race, I'll definitely not betray my body. You're thinking too much. Rakshasa Yu was interrupted by the martial Dao prime body before she could finish. This time round, Rakshasa Yu was truly a little dazed. There was no need for her to call him master, pour him tea, offer her body or betray her clansmen. From the looks of it, there was nothing to lose by submitting to Desolate Marshal. The moment that thought crossed her mind, Rakshasa Yu spat internally. The reason why she was in such a state was completely because of Desolate Marshal. How could she have such thoughts? Rakshasa Yu shrugged her head and lamented internally, I must be confused because of the immense heat just now. Right then, the martial Dao prime body said slowly, I won't have any demands or restrictions on your freedom under normal circumstances. In fact, you can even challenge me at any time if you feel that you're strong enough. As long as you can defeat me, there's naturally no need for you to submit to me. When she heard that, Rakshasa Yu's eyes lit up as she asked, Are you serious? This was equivalent to giving her hope. As long as she could defeat Desolate Marshal, she could break free from this shackle. You don't have to question my words. The martial Dao prime body said indifferently. What exactly do you want me to do then? Rakshasa Yu asked in a deep voice. The martial Dao prime body said, Make a move now and head to Ethereal Peak to guard it in secret. Kill anyone who trespasses into Ethereal Peak. That's all. Rakshasa Yu could not believe it. The reason why Desolate Marshal wanted her to submit was because he wanted her to protect a sect. That's all. The martial Dao prime body nodded. Rakshasa Yu looked at the martial Dao prime body with a conflicted expression. She suddenly realized that she could not understand this person. A moment later, Rakshasa Yu suddenly asked, I want to know why you gave me a choice instead of killing me outright. There are 2 reasons. The martial Dao prime body said, First, you stopped that Rakshasa outside Pingyang town. Furthermore, you didn't kill any mortals. Second, the reason why I spared your life was because I wanted you to protect Ethereal Peak. That's all. Rakshasa Yu frowned slightly. That's all. The martial Dao prime body nodded. Humph. Rakshasa Yu harumphed coldly and turned to leave. For some reason, she felt an inexplicable sense of loss and frustration. Before long, she suddenly turned around and looked at the martial Dao prime body, sneering, Desolate Marshal, I haven't even made a Dao oath. Aren't you afraid that I'll escape secretly? If you escape, I'll naturally capture you back. The tone of the martial Dao prime body was calm, but his words were unusually domineering. He's still as detestable as ever. Rakshasa Yu sneered internally and turned to leave. A gust of wind blew past and her figure vanished. Chapter 1487. Gathering of Half-Martial Ancestors. Chapter 1487. Gathering of Half-Martial Ancestors. Young master, we're letting her off just like that. Tao Yao turned his head slightly and asked in confusion. Of course, what else is there? The martial Dao prime body smiled. Will Rakshasa Yu expose the secret of your prime body? Tao Yao was worried. No. The martial Dao prime body shook his head. That woman is prideful. Since I gave her hope, she'll definitely obsess over it and hope to defeat me one day. Furthermore, the martial Dao prime body smiled gently. I left a martial spirit imprint on her essence spirit. If she's truly dishonest and has second thoughts, there's no need to keep her alive. The moment the martial Dao furnace refined Rakshasa Yu's bloodline phenomenon, the martial Dao prime body had already left that imprint. At that time, Rakshasa Yu's life was hanging by a thread and she was flustered, so she did not realize it at all. If the martial Dao prime body discovered anything unusual about Rakshasa Yu, her essence spirit would be burned to ashes by the martial spirit fire with a single thought. The methods of the martial Dao prime body were almost godly. Young master, why did you ask her to protect Ethereal Peak? Tao Yao thought for a moment and asked again, is Ethereal Peak in any danger? I don't know. The martial Dao prime body shook his head. However, the Green Lotus true body is cultivating in the Kunlun ruins and has not appeared for a long time. The Rakshasa race can't wait any longer and already has designs on Pingyang town. It won't be surprising for anyone to target Ethereal Peak. It's just a safety precaution. It'll be best if no one has any designs on Ethereal Peak. If anyone truly doesn't know what's good for them, Rakshasa Yu will be able to handle them given her strength. Rakshasa Yu was the young mistress of the Rakshasa race and was at the conjoint body realm. However, even human half-martial ancestors might not be able to gain any advantage against her. Only the strongest half-martial ancestors of the human race could fight against her. Right now, Ethereal Peak could not even be considered as an upper sect. Even if anyone targeted Ethereal Peak, the strongest would only be conjoint body mighty figures or half-martial ancestor experts. Mahayana patriarchs were all in the advanced ancient battlefield. Who would waste time to come to the North region to do such a thing? Young master, I can help to protect Ethereal Peak as well. Tao Yao raised his head slightly and clenched his fists. For some reason, after the martial Dao prime body subdued Rakshasa Yu, Tao Yao felt that his status seemed to have been challenged. The martial Dao prime body smiled. You still have to protect Meal. Ah. Tao Yao was stunned. The martial Dao prime body still required protection. I'm about to break through. The martial Dao prime body said indifferently and stood up to head to his room. Tao Yao, I'll leave Pingyang town to you. 1. Don't worry, young master. Tao Yao agreed hurriedly. North region. Glass Palace. A middle-aged cultivator stood in front of a cave abode on an immortal mountain. He was tall and wore a glass Daoist robe that shone with a rainbow luster under the sunlight. It was extremely beautiful. The person stood in midair and shone with a divine light. He was like a god with a terrifying aura. Chen Yu. He was a half-martial ancestor of Glass Palace. Chen Yu's life was also a legend. When he was young, he experienced wars and lost his family, turning into an orphan child. Relying on the fact that he had a strong and tall figure from a tender age, coupled with his ruthless nature despite his youth, he gathered a group of people before long and lived off robbing others. Later on, a Dao Lord of Glass Palace appreciated his potential and he stepped onto the path of cultivation, soaring through the skies thereafter. Be it the Golden Core Phenomenon ranking or Heaven and Earth Dharma Characteristic ranking, Chen Yu was one of the top 3 existences back then and was lauded as one of the strongest paragons of that generation. Before long. Suddenly, an auspicious cloud floated over from the distant skies. 4 figures rode on the cloud and their auras were not inferior to Chen Yu. Another 4 half-martial ancestor experts. Ha 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 ha. Chen Yu burst into laughter and rode the wind, taking the initiative to welcome them. Fellow Daoists, how have you been? The 4 half-martial ancestors came from different sections. The one in the middle was Chaos Essence Sect's half-martial ancestor D. Fan. Another person was skinny and had an indifferent expression. Standing there, he was like an unsheathed sword with a sharp killing intent. This was half-martial ancestor D. Ju of Sword Sect. The cultivator on the left had a square face and looked dignified as his body shone with faint lightning. He was half-martial ancestor Kong Xiao of Zephyr Thunder Palace. The cultivator on the right wore a dark golden dermic robe with mysterious stars tattooed on it. This was from Heavenly Dipper Sect, half-martial ancestor Illumination. The 5 half-martial ancestor experts were considered notorious. In the cultivation world, every single one of them would attract countless gazes wherever they went. Furthermore, there were 5 half-martial ancestors gathered. Among the 5 half-martial ancestors, some of them were even paragons and monster incarnates of the same generation who had fought before. We've all been cultivating and comprehending the Tao of divine powers. Indeed, it's been a long time. D. Fan said in a deep voice, if Desolate Marshal hadn't appeared out of nowhere in this generation, the few of us probably wouldn't have been alarmed. However, we realized it too late. Half-martial ancestor Illumination of Heavenly Dipper Sect shook his head. I heard that in the battle at Enigma Palace, this lad's combat strength was torrential and even the Palace Lord of Enigma Palace was suppressed by him. This lad has already matured. Even if we join forces, we might not stand a chance of winning. Half-martial ancestor Kong Xiao of Zephyr Thunder Palace sighed gently. Humph. Suddenly, Sword Sect's half-martial ancestor D. Ju sneered, if you guys are afraid, I alone am enough. Let's see if Desolate Marshal's heaven-slaying sword art is stronger or my earth-slaying sword art. Both half-martial ancestor Illumination and half-martial ancestor Kong Xiao frowned. They were all half-martial ancestor experts and had similar reputations to half-martial ancestor D. Ju. Naturally, they could not hold it in any longer after being mocked by D. Ju. Alright, this rare gathering is to deal with Desolate Marshal. Don't fight among ourselves first and let others laugh at us. Chen Yu tried to smooth things over. Half-martial ancestor D. Ju still had a disdainful expression. The earth-slaying sword art had always been in Sword Sect. However, that sword art was difficult to comprehend and cultivate. Throughout history, there were very few people who could cultivate that sword art. In order to increase the combat strength of Sword Sect cultivators, the Sword Emperor used the earth-slaying sword art as a foundation and deduced the lifeless sword art. The cultivation of the lifeless sword art was relatively simple compared to it. Of course, its power was far inferior to the earth-slaying sword art as well. Half-martial ancestor D. Ju indeed had the right to be proud. If a life-and-death battle were to break out, he would be the one most likely to survive among the 5 of them. Half-martial ancestor D. Ju did not have any deep feud with Su Zimo. He only had a single goal for coming out of seclusion, the heaven-slaying sword art in Su Zimo's possession. If he could obtain the heaven-slaying sword art, he would definitely be able to advance to the Mahayana realm smoothly and his future potential would be unimaginable. Everyone, the main reason why we're heading to Ethereal Peak is to force Desolate Marshal to appear. D. Fan said in a deep voice, from the information I gathered, Desolate Marshal is an extremely loyal person. If he knew about this, he would definitely barge in foolishly even if he knew that it was a trap. That's a good plan. Half-martial ancestor Illumination nodded. Once Desolate Marshal appears, even if we can't defeat him with our joined forces, experts of the primordial 6 races will definitely be able to lock him down. 1. At that time, Desolate Marshal will definitely die. Chapter 1488. Too noisy. Chapter 1488. Too noisy. More than 100 years ago, Su Zimo came out of seclusion and entered the Dharma characteristic realm. All the upper sect masters of the North region came to pay their respects. Thereafter, Su Zimo destroyed Dragon Tiger Sect and left all their cultivation techniques and secret skills in Ethereal Peak. In Dragon Tiger Sect, Su Zimo obtained many high-level elixirs, Dao Lord Dermic weapons and a large number of spirit stones from the sect masters of the upper sects. Later on, when Monk Yuan Bei passed away, Su Zimo shifted all the ancient books at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley to Ethereal Peak. With such a massive amount of cultivation resources and rich cultivation techniques and secret skills, the many cultivators of Ethereal Peak experienced a massive boost to their cultivation realms and their overall strength. What Ethereal Peak obtained was not only the foundation and resources of Dragon Tiger Sect, but also the resources of Daming Monastery and Fahua Monastery. After more than 100 years, the old immortal crane broke through once more and entered the conjoint body realm. As for Ethereal Peak's sect master, Ling Yun, he was already a Dharma characteristic Dao Lord. The 5 peak masters of the past, Xueqi, Lu Hui and the others, were even at the void reversion realm. Over the years, due to the sect's rise in cultivation techniques and secret skills of super sects such as Daming and Fahua monasteries, there were even some Dharma characteristic Dao Lords and conjoint body mighty figures who were attracted to join the sect. Including Yan Qi, Ethereal Peak's current strength and foundation was similar to the 108 upper sects. This day, 5 people arrived above Ethereal Peak. The 5 of them descended and stood in 5 different directions, surrounding the massive Ethereal Peak in the middle. "Who's there?" The cultivator guarding the entrance shouted. "Humph." Among the 5 of them, a cold and sharp cultivator was motionless. However, a bright glint flashed through his eyes. The cultivator guarding the mountain gate was sliced into 2 instantly and his blood splattered on the spot, dying. As a half-martial ancestor, a single gaze was enough for Di Ju to kill a Foundation Establishment cultivator. Clang, clang, clang. A warning bell sounded from Ethereal Peak. Many cultivators appeared and looked towards the skies. The old immortal crane, Ling Yun, Xueqi and the others came forth one after another as well. This aura. The old immortal crane's expression changed starkly as she looked at the 5 figures in midair. Half-martial ancestors. A conjoint body mighty figure at the side exclaimed with a pale expression. The shout caused a commotion in Ethereal Peak. In the hearts of most Ethereal Peak cultivators, half-martial ancestor experts were legendary existences and were worlds apart from them. To think that they would see them today. Furthermore, 5 of them had appeared all of a sudden. The most terrifying thing was that the 5 half-martial ancestors were clearly hostile and murderous. Against the might of the 5 half-martial ancestors, the 5 peaks of Ethereal Peak could not hold on any longer and cracks appeared on the mountains. Although the old immortal crane did not recognize the 5 half-martial ancestors, she understood when she saw their sect emblems. Sword Sect, Chaos Essence Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace. All of those super sects had extremely deep grudges with Su Zimo. The 5 half-martial ancestor experts must have come for Desolate Martial. Against the might of half-martial ancestors, a mighty figure of Ethereal Peak had a horrified expression and said with a trembling voice, "Greetings, 5 half-martial ancestors. Desolate Martial is not in Ethereal Peak, he." "That's not important." Di Fan interrupted the conjoint body mighty figure with a cold expression and said indifferently, "Desolate Martial came from Ethereal Peak, that's all that matter. Now that we're here, the tens of thousands of cultivators from Ethereal Peak can dream about leaving alive." A single sentence from a half-martial ancestor was equivalent to declaring the death penalty for everyone from Ethereal Peak. The old immortal crane felt bitter. Even though she had cultivated to the conjoint body realm, she could not defeat the might of a half-martial ancestor. Against absolute strength, she still had no way of resisting. Please spare me, senior." A few mighty figures of Ethereal Peak knelt down and begged with horrified expressions. "It's not my fault," Di Fan said coldly. "The fault is that you guys shouldn't have joined Ethereal Peak or gotten involved with Desolate Martial. We joined Ethereal Peak later on and have never seen Desolate Martial before. We have nothing to do with Desolate Martial or Ethereal Peak." The mighty figures defended desperately. "Cut the crap with them." Di Ju sneered and waved his sleeves. Instantly, a few sword chi burst forth at an extremely fast speed and entered the glabellas of the mighty figures right in front of their eyes. These mighty figures of Ethereal Peak let go of their dignity and everything else as they begged for mercy. However, they did not expect that they would be the first to die. Not to mention that Di Ju was a half-martial ancestor expert. Even if Di Ju was at the conjoint body realm, the few mighty figures could not defend against the slash. The old immortal crane shook her head gently. When Ethereal Peak was on the brink of danger, These few mighty figures did not hesitate and tried their best to sever their relationship with Ethereal Peak. There was no pity in the old immortal crane's heart for their deaths. Activate! The old immortal crane shouted. Xueqi and the others were long prepared as dermic powers burst forth from their fingertips, entering every single corner of Ethereal Peak. Buzz! The formation patterns lit up. Ethereal Peak's sect protection formation had already been activated. How dare you take out such an array formation in front of us? How ignorant! Half-martial ancestor Kong Shao sneered and extended his palm, pointing at the firmaments. Instantly, dark clouds filled the skies of Ethereal Peak. Snap! A gigantic thunderbolt descended and struck Ethereal Peak's sect protection formation. Crack! 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 Cracks appeared on the sect protection formation, and it shattered under the despaired gazes of many Ethereal Peak cultivators. The sect protection formation could not even defend against a casual attack from half-martial ancestor Kong Shao. The old immortal crane sighed. The difference was too great. Even she was merely an ant in the eyes of the 5 half-martial ancestors, let alone the other cultivators of Ethereal Peak. She could be crushed with ease. Don't worry. Defan smiled gently. We won't kill all of you in a day. We'll kill you slowly. Only half will be killed today. We'll kill another half tomorrow. I'll spread the news. As long as Desolate Marshal is still in Tianhuang mainland, he'll definitely know. Everyone from Ethereal Peak had dejected expressions. The 5 half-martial ancestors exchanged glances and chuckled. The 5 of you are too noisy. Can you scram further? Suddenly, a voice sounded from Ethereal Peak. It was a woman's voice that was extremely pleasant to listen to. However, there was a deep hint of impatience and disgust in her tone. Everyone from Ethereal Peak was stunned and looked over instinctively. Someone among them dared to speak rudely to a half-martial ancestor. Defan and the others shifted their gazes and locked onto a woman at the same time. The woman walked out from the crowd slowly. She was at the conjoint body realm and was a head taller than the people around her. Her skin was fair as snow and she was extremely beautiful with a hint of foreign charm in her eyes. Defan and the others frowned slightly. Although this woman looked no different from a human, they had lived for more than 10,000 years and could sense that something was amiss. The old immortal crane was stunned as well. That was because she had never seen this woman before. More than that, she did not know when this woman arrived here. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.